Welcome to a brand new episode of TCP. Boy, we got some roster moves. Got things going on. Players being traded. The trade deadline has finally happened, which means everybody, all these teams just kind of scrambled to get some players across the line. A couple of late announcements as well, but we managed to catch all of that. And now roll it all up into one nice episode where we talk about every single trade that happened the last week.
Which is a metric
Yiska
ton.
already knew about. That Yiska already knew about 3 weeks in advance. So,
did I not know about any trade? No, I think I knew all of them. Unfortunately,
Cool
some of them you just can't get over. Like, I knew the creative. Can you imagine what it must be like being me? Knowing, not
once.
Having been told this is happening by someone, and then I'm like, oh, God damn it, I can't validate it. And then Prophet starts playing Brig, and I'm like, I'm losing my mind. And then it's like, okay, so if the Outlaws start playing, and it's also not, Iris playing, then you just gotta tweet, nah, I can't tweet it. And then Lastra is playing Brig, and I'm like, how am I the only one seeing this? Like, such an unrealistic. I mean, to be fair, it's a very unusual trade as well. But yeah, in the end, like, once again, we're only doing 100% things, so that unfortunately didn't work.
Man, and that's only the tip of the iceberg.
True. Quite a bit more.
Because Yiska had all the justice shit on lock as well for the longest time.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. Having had a little bit of a bird's eye view on that situation, man, what a tough week of negotiations all around. That was... We gotta have a better system than this. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe there can't be. But Jesus Christ, that was tense. And I think all the options that were on the table, like so much could have happened. And now we're just in a situation where I think I kind of like this solution. Because
there's definitely other potential ways justice could have gone about it that people don't even realize. Yep. So I mean, this is one of the outcomes, and here we are.
Yeah. I hope I eventually get to talk about the macro aspect and how to create leverage in the Overwatch League with your trades and whatnot. Because this is a very interesting case study. But unfortunately, the problem is I have some behind the scenes information. I don't have the full picture. And I would have to ask these people, and I doubt they would give me that information. But just like having a bird's eye view on this situation, I felt like David at Edinburgh half the time. You're just like looking at this, and you're like seeing like, I don't know, a snake eat a cute bunny, and you could be kicking the snake. That it's totally a thing that you could be doing, but you're now vowed to the ways of nature. You're just a journalist trying to report on what is happening.
You're just a nature photographer watching.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in the end, it was an interesting week, but also like nobody lost their jobs as far as I can tell so far. Is that true? I think Supreme is still employed. Or rather became a player. I think 3 very promising players have found a position. I'm not saying all is fine and dandy there. I'm sure some players would have liked other outcomes. But overall, I think like this is probably a thing that most people can live with. And the Justice is still playing well. So, I mean...
We will get to... We'll get to them. We're going to get to the actual news. But first, I want to announce that Optic Texas are keeping their 2022 squad together for Modern Warfare 2, which I think is great.
Jesus
so, yeah. Dashi and Ellie got dropped for like 24 hours, and I was quite concerned, but seems like they're all back together now, which is good. I'm actually really keen for Modern Warfare 2. Does look pretty good. So
yeah,
I'm down. I already have it pre-ordered. I'm gonna play the campaign a week early because this is how it works now. And I'll be making my imminent switch to the CDL. So it's been nice, guys. It's been good. It's been good. I actually don't know that much about Call of Duty, but I know they make good content. The team content in CDL is just so much better. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because the player personalities are obviously way bigger, and like they're just more entertaining to watch in terms of player content. But yeah, there's less of a language barrier because it's all like NA EU players, and everyone speaks English, so it's just easy to consume the content. But yeah, get to be a bit of a content fiend there. The content we got though is, I feel like this is the kind of stuff that happens in both leagues. Like a bunch of trades happen, players get dropped and picked up all the time. They actually have players being picked up and dropped all the time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it gets as much like, I think for them it's a lot more normal, whereas for us it's like, what is happening? Everything's on fire. Save us.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot to cover today, so we'll get into it. There's all the justice stuff, the Houston Seoul trade. We have, looking into how the games have gone for the teams that have picked up the new players from Washington, etc. Junker Queen's confirmed nerfed. We had the whole Spitfire trade and drop as well. And APAC started. So without further ado, 258. Brought to you by AVRL, Vista Baby, Battle Crab, Refine Bean, Bronzebot Brewhouse, Picasso, Chris R34444, Cash 67, Lol Shin, Pork Chop Sammy, Rex Zane, Volamel Smooth Nuts. With YouTube members Ice Ham Jello, William Jesse Vishman, Violem 6, AK, and Chris R. So, did we reach a pretty happy ending for the Washington Justice, or at least for the players? Because as we kind of alluded to, there were a bunch of different options, which actually did include potentially dropping the current roster, but they managed to keep on 5 members of this team. They've decided not to sign a 6th member. Why don't we actually bring up the Grant tweet about that? No, he actually didn't make a tweet. It was a Grant message from the Washington Justice Discord server that, I guess, in a way, it's like an official announcement, even though it's not like really an announcement in the way that it came through the Justice socials. Paraphrasing, essentially, they are not going to be picking up a 6th player to fill out the roster minimum league requirements. What they're going to be doing is kind of taking the New York Excelsior route that they had earlier on, where Kuki was signed on as a player, and the Washington Justice will be putting a staff member on as their final member, and will not be rounding out the roster. So there is that. I don't know if we can get the tweet or not, or there was a tweet covering the message. Is essentially what it was. But yeah, that came from within the Justice camp. So yeah, yes, let's bring that up now. So yeah, they are not going to be signing any further players. No further players can be moved anyway because the roster the trade deadline has been reached, and you can't now do anything unless it's with contenders players. So all Overwatch League player movements have concluded, unless you want to pick up Piggy, but I don't think that's the goal. I remember like seeing some confusion around this, and there's a lot of fans that are upset by this move, obviously. But there's like fans like, well, why wouldn't you pick up a 6th player? Like, how are they going to win without a 6th player? Or like, oh, I think they should have kept Happy and got rid of Assassin, or they should have done this, they should have done that. It's like, I don't think you guys understand. The goal of these moves is not to create a better roster for the Justice. It's about cutting cost. Okay, so with people talking about it like, oh, they should have done this. This would have been better for the teams. Like, it's not. That's not what it's about. It's not about what would have been better for the team. It's about what would have saved more money. So you guys are looking at it from the wrong perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's an interesting point of view to like what maximizes potential here, right? I mean, we heard some other things on the table. I think Halo like was soft hinting the Team Peps thing and whatnot. Like if you sit 5 or 6 Frenchmen in their own apartments, you don't have to pay them, housing and whatnot. That probably maximizes, right? But there are of course other values to consider here, right? Like you still hold the contract for Decay. Do you think you can get money for him in the off season? I think that's probably going to be the case, right? We will see how it goes, but like once budgets are replenished, one guy makes a big move for a big player. Now we have set the precedent. Everyone's once again bringing out the war chest. It happens like this every year. Maybe it won't be that way this year or next off season. We'll see. I believe it when I see it because you don't know how often I have heard mean and lean. In terms of like economic roster building, like every season you hear mean and lean, and then in the end it's like, still some rosters that are very healthy in terms of salary healthy is a bad adjective here, but like paying a solid amount. So yeah, I don't know. I think like even just from the outside looking at this situation, if you keep the objectives in mind that every party has here. It's probably a very interesting situation and with what kind of solutions you could come up with here.
This is probably the most...
It's like, yeah, I think, gonna say kind of similar to what you're probably headed to, AVRL, is like, this is probably one of the better, like, outcomes that could have happened in the multiverse of...
This is the outcome that fucked over the least amount of people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Because if people were fuming now, they'd be fuming a lot more if the 5 remaining players of Justice were let go.
Yeah.
Especially if they were let go after the trade deadline, which was a possibility.
Yeah, the fact that, like, per Yiska's reporting that was on the table, that, a team was about to, like, hold players effectively kind of hostage, is kind of, pardon my French, kind of fucked. So imagine the discourse that would have happened if that were the case. Not good, not ideal.
So, credit where credit due. Props to Justice for actually, despite this entire situation, finding the best possible outcome that is going to appease Mark Ein while still not ending the careers of multiple players at the same time. So, like, you've kind of, if there was a way, this is one of those, like, RPG game options where you needed to play 2 separate factions and ride the line as much as possible to keep them both happy. And if you did it perfectly through a series of different moves, you get to the end of the decision making, and there's a third dialogue option that only unlocks if you played the negotiation as perfectly as you could, and you somehow managed to fulfill both. So somehow we reached that. Somehow we got that.
Yeah,
which we got to be at least. Somewhat pleased about, because this could have easily have gone way worse.
Oh, for sure. Could have gone bad real quick.
And we'll get to the games as well, but we should probably go over what the actual trades ended up being, because we circled around it, and I have to assume maybe some people don't know. We'll also talk about how the Justice now look post trade. So the end of the Justice saga is Happy to Gladiators, Mag to Boston. Actually, chronologically, Mag to Boston happened first. It was announced first. Then Mag to Boston, then Happy to Gladiators, and then finally Vigilante to Atlanta. And the team was now running Assassin, Decay role swapping from Hitscan to Flex. Caligos coming in to play the tank position as the only tank now. Well, whoever's playing is the only of whatever they are. And then you have Open and Krillin filling the support positions. And then the final position is left open to nobody, to a staff member that will never see playtime. Do we want to go over that part just yet? I don't know if we want to talk about the morality of the staff member 6th position thing, because I saw some fan discourse that was like, the team should not be allowed to get away with this. Like, this should be illegal. And I think morally, I agree. But I also think, like, in order to do that, the league has to define what the hell a player is. Because until you can define what a player is, legally speaking, you can sign whoever the fuck you want in that spot.
Yep.
Because you can just say, oh yeah, this is a player. Because you have to consider the fact that there are teams that are not trying to like skirt the rules, that are trying to do this genuinely, and that would be Houston last year with Jake, right? He's both a staff member and a player. He's a player coach, right? And so for the teams that are trying to do it legitimately, you can't punish them. No. So if you're looking at it from Houston's perspective, it's like, how do you define what a player is? Because this is a coach member that's also playing, is legitimately playing, and is still a pro player. That's hard to quantify.
Yeah, it's almost
hard
impossible.
to write into the. It's hard to write into the rule book, because any other team can use that and pretend they're being genuine about it. It's like, you know, of course Bob from marketing is a player. What are you talking about? Like, how could you say he's not a player? And you're like, you know, even if you, I heard some fans try to say like, well, you would define it by like, you know, maybe you have to judge.
Time.
Maybe you have to judge if they're like a good enough player. I'm like, how would you do that? Like then you get into like some real weird territory where it's just like, you know, what if there's you can't. What are you going to do? Like set a minimum rank requirement? Like you have to be 4K SR to join the league? Like what are you even going to do there? Like basically what it ends up being is like anybody that any team feels could be like a potential good player on their team. The team should be able to pick up that player or that person without any sort of, you know, without any sort of restriction, because then you get into the weird spaces like, I want to get Patty, but he's currently playing Valorant. Obviously, he's not in ranked. He's not going to be 4K because he's not fucking playing Overwatch ranked. So I can't pick up Patapan now. Like, you know, do you understand what I mean? Like, you get in some real muddy waters there by placing like all these restrictions and distinctions on what that is. So you end up just having to trust the teams to be like, well, whoever the team wants to pick up, they can pick up, and they can suffer the consequences of that if they get the wrong person. Then I'll get.
It's
also, it's like,
go on.
And then it's like, finally, it's like, well, you got to define it by like, you know, their intention to win. It's like, well, how do you define intention to win?
Yeah.
Because I could say, like, for me, if I wanted to skirt around the rules as a GM, I'd be like, yeah, our intention is to win with Bod from marketing. What are you gonna do about it? Like, you can't say that. It's your word against mine. You can't say that I don't intend to win. And then and then when we lose, I can just say, well, you know, we made the wrong call. Yeah, our intention was to win, and we made the wrong call. Unlucky. That happens to teams. You can't. Again, it's your word against mine. You can't say that I think morally we can get to the stage where like I could lie through my fucking teeth, and I know I'm lying. You know I'm lying, but by the word of the law, I'm clear. I'm fine. You can't do shit. That's just how it is.
Look, like there's two things that seem so pristinely clear to me. Like, I don't understand why one of the top comments is like, how is that even allowed? So, for one, this is the third time this happened.
Yes, this has happened before. I don't know
like,
if anybody's
how is that? It's not unprecedented whatsoever, right? We've seen it with what's it?
Excel?
Yeah, with Cookie and then NVM.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
sharing the value. Okay.
So why is that now a problem? Well, it shouldn't be. I think to me it feels like we just took like a machete to the groin. We have this giant gaping wound, and someone comes up with a band-aid and goes, well, maybe we should judge the intention of the team that is fielding or is signing a coach in that position. No, what we should be doing is create a fucking league that works so there are incentives for people to win again. That's the solution.
Yes. The incentive should be you want to sign actual players to win because you're trying to win.
Yeah.
Instead of you like punishing the loophole doesn't make sense when the idea is that you should be incentivizing teams to not even go towards a loophole in the first place.
Yeah. And every good thing follows from that, right? And of course, like, that's easier said than done for sure. But like trying to design rules around that is just so weird. And the other thing is, and I'm gonna be honest with you, like I've no one like. You fans fucking suck creating incentives for people in this league.
Sorry, did you say the fans suck? Because that's kind of based.
Fans
Anyway,
fucking
continue.
suck creating
They do.
incentives for people to give you shit you want in this league. Everyone who has any sort of attempted any sort of transparency in this league will eventually grow to regret it. Because as you move out of obscurity, you now become a target. Every single one of the shitstorms that we had around, especially staff members, this is always true. You know that this is why you have to half expect that Brad from ATL is a little bit like abnormal, because he keeps putting himself into the positions where he keeps sharing interests while getting shed on by the public because they have a face to put.
Well,
the
he's eventually
criticism
going to stop too. Brad's going to eventually stop too.
Maybe.
The thing is, like, his skin is abnormally thick for like he has eaten shit many times, and he's still providing insights into all their decisions to an almost unprecedented degree that most other people in this position.
And it serves him no benefit because
nobody's rewarding for them.
How does it help him? It only fucks with him. It only fucks with him because A, other teams will use your insider knowledge against you if they can, and B, the fans will fucking use it against you too.
Yeah.
So the very small number of like people that are like, oh, thank you, Brad. Like it's so good that you're being transparent. You should be angry at the other fans that are using that as ammo against the staff members coming out and being transparent. You should be pissed that less and less staff members want to be open and transparent, because if they do, they just get shit on. So, you know, you're just not going to get people with transparency.
The thing is, here's your best. Now, like, fans are listening to this going like, well, that's not really true. Okay, why did you not give the NYXL the same energy that you gave the Justice? They have exhibited almost exactly the same, like, results. The coaching,
worse results, actually.
Yeah, the coaching situation, right? They don't have absolutely comparable budgets, but reasonably comparable budgets, right? Like almost everything, but you until some social media manager fucked up in here, and also this is another hill. Bro, this is an esport. How is 90% of our Discord about social media managers now? Stop. Okay, that's my yeah. But the thing is, like, it's that it's who is listening right now? Who knows what Nugget looks like? Who has ever heard Nugget's voice or has seen his face? So,
how are you, Nugget? I've never seen Nugget and you in the same room.
Seen a single tweet or
and
statement or anything.
You know what? You know that dude is smart because you have never seen his face, heard him talk, or like that's the best thing you can do. That's accurately analyzing the situation, knowing that you're not getting any personal benefit out of that. This is the type of move where, like, if everyone did this and this was just an assumption, like that general managers are expected to do this, then I think it could increase quality of the product and whatnot. But for there to be no incentives and to have, like, implicitly baked in this incentive structure that, initially it might feel good. You can educate the masses. You can increase empathy for your position. But you're now opening the wide side. Like, now people have a face to put the criticism to. All the unjust shit that, who's mostly invisible as well? The owner behind the general manager or the coach or the player or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's all guided onto that one person. Like, how often people have this fucked up simulacra of, like, this one dude of an organization that's just tried to be informative dude and now is, like, the scapegoat is crazy. And, like, unless we stop doing this, like, the incentive structure is just not there. Why would you ever, like, even as a player, why would you ever, like, we played our game today, it didn't work like this, we will try our best to do better next week? Why would you ever give any other answer than
you do
this
that,
one?
and people call you salty. It's like, L bro, L ratio bro, salty. It's like, you can't even say anything. Like, players can't even, like, make a statement about why they think that, nothing. You know, people were just being stupid about it.
Like, think through every single general manager that has eaten shit this season, and you will find that there's a large overlap about them having been a person in the community or having, you know, done interviews and whatnot, and those that happened. Yep. The correlation is crazy, and it's not coincidental.
People are very scapegoaty. The community, not just this community, all communities, all just online interaction is extremely scapegoaty. People want to blame somebody. Like, you know, the more I look at our society, the more I'm like, yeah, we're still stuck in the 1700s, guys. Like, people are still looking for witches to burn on the stake in 2020 fucking 2. You know, proverbially now, like, we're not actually burning. Well, in some cases, people do lose their jobs. So you make the argument distinction of like whether people being burned at the stake or not, because the people that just get fucking witch hunted and lose their jobs, I would say that in some case, you know, you lose your career, you lose your livelihood. I mean, in some cases that is your life. Yeah. And I can answer the question as like, well, why have people not looked at NYXL in the same way? Which, by the way, and I have to preface this by saying what I said in the last episode, which is that this is not me saying that people should suddenly go and attack the NYXL. But
Yeah, that wasn't my point.
The distinction of the double standard that exists in the community, which is like, you know, here's why people didn't. Here's why the biggest drama surrounding NYXL this season is about the fucking social media manager and the tweeting. That somehow is the biggest drama behind this team this year, even though their list of offenses is as great as the Justice's, if not more, if not worse. The reason they've escaped any vitriol is no one knows who their GM is, and people, I guess people know who Kooky is, and because he got burned at the stake, people were satiated. Like, people's bloodlust was satiated because they saw somebody burn. You know, the fresh smell of a staff member on a pyre in the morning is what the people want. And what else? They were baited and had the wool pull over their eyes with the whole Vulcan situation. They didn't like it, but they also didn't hate it. They didn't hate as much as the staff announcement for the Washington Justice, even though it's functionally the same thing. You will never see this staff member from the Justice actually play, just like you never saw Vulcan play. Functionally, they are there to exist as a fill-in player to fill minimum roster requirements. And there's zero intention to play them.
Also,
like MVM last year and Valiant as well.
Real talk, like I saw some people brought up the defense. Well, Kooky was an Overwatch League player. Okay, how does
was he though?
Okay, in your mind, okay, how does it make if you believe that's a material difference, then why would they need to sign Vulcan? Like if Kellen doesn't make it there because of his visa, then you just field Kooky, right? That's his position. That's a former Overwatch League player, that seemingly in the same situation. If that's your like material difference, then you must believe that he will be able to jump in. Otherwise, he's just a coach like everybody else, like there's just a situation, like the Valiant situation, and like it's looking like many situations in the future.
They're targeting the wrong thing. Like they are targeting the teams for doing this, and not the source of the problem, which is teams are incentivized to do this because they don't want to fucking invest, because they don't want to put more money into something that is losing them money. That's the real problem, guys.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And no one's talking about that.
Yeah,
or at least people are like more. They want to, you know, they're literally wanting blood, burning the wrong fucking person at the stake, because they need to see somebody burn. Meanwhile, the real cause of the issues, they're fucking hiding behind glass and just one-way glass and just smoking their cigar. That's maybe a little bit disingenuous. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's the analogy I'm going to go with to paint the picture.
Yeah. Insert some
it's not as
guillotines
simple as that, guys, but it's something. It's just what I'm saying is like, you know, functionally there's no difference between NYXL putting Kooky and Vulcan on the lineup theoretically and never intending to play them as what Justice is doing now. Functionally, there is zero difference.
Yeah.
The fact that the only thing that moves the needle for people is like, well, at least Kooky was an outplay. Like that. What the fuck does that even mean? Like that doesn't make any difference. That makes zero difference. Sorry, it doesn't make any difference. Because even if Kooky played, it wouldn't be fucking good anyway. Like it's if they just had, if Justice did this with an ex Overwatch League player, maybe they Maybe they only played in 2018. They
Somebody
have no
call
intent.
it Boink.
How about how about if they brought back Boink? When I say bring back Boink, they're like, how about they do an aesthetic signing for Boink? Just this right now, do an aesthetic signing for Boink. Boink hasn't played the game in fucking 6 years. I'm exaggerating because the game's only been out for 6 years. He hasn't played the game since he retired, and he has no intention of playing again. Literally doesn't play the game. Maybe doesn't play any games. They cosmetically signed him, and your defense is going to be, oh, but at least he's an ex-Overwatch League player. Like, but functionally it makes no difference. So why would you even bring that up?
Yeah, it's very weird the way this is differently framed. I will also say, just because I feel like I've maybe come across as like giving NYXL special shit. No, it's the principal case, and I will even go out and say, like, I think Nugget is probably one of the reasons why they're doing better at the moment. So I think it's just correctly interpreting the situation. There's no incentive. The one thing that you could be doing is stand in solidarity as a wider coaching staff of a team. All be open and all become like a united front where, you know, you like it's not just the one person that's a public face, you know,
Facing figure, yeah.
to become the one that receives all the criticism. I would say, for instance, an organization that usually does it pretty well here is Dallas, for instance. Like, it's no problem to get interviews with, you know, Aid in the past, Rush in the past, Tasmo, like all of these guys. Like, if you request them to do interviews, they will just do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that helps just like demystify the situation where, I guess to a degree, I have empathy with fans because like the lack of transparency, you know, we're pattern-seeking creatures. You look at the information you have, you overinterpret what you have, and then like some shit comes out. But we gotta do better than that, because the reason you don't have the information is because what you do with the information doesn't lead to desirable outcomes for the people in these positions, and it leads to a worse product. And there are very few things in that particular way. Of course, like we can talk, we have to differentiate. Like, yes, creating incentives to win again in this league is important, but it is also important to look at incentives for people in charge of certain teams or, you know, head coaches and whatnot, and give them incentives to provide a richer experience without eventually just having to eat shit. And yes, you can say like, well, that's just part of the job. A part of the job is like you're in the public eye, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you don't have to talk, then you don't, and then nobody gets to hear shit ever.
That's the thing. You're part of the public eye as a defense. Cool, then people won't be part of the public eye.
Yes.
That's the response. You are going to have invisible GMs and coaches that never say anything, that refuse interviews, that never show their faces, never make statements, never have tweets, don't even have social media accounts.
Yeah.
They're going to be complete Illuminati invisible forces, because if your defenses, they're part of the, you know, public view, then people will stop being part of the public view and you can all eat shit. That's the legit. I'm not even joking. That's not even exaggeration. That's legitimately the response. That is the direction we are headed in if your defense is public view.
Look,
the other defense people are like, oh, it's like, oh, this is how it's traditional sports is. Like, yeah, but in traditional sports, these motherfuckers are being paid millions of dollars. In a sport, by the way, that people don't ridicule and has been lasting for 100 years. Where, you know, and also the reach, the level of clout is different. We're talking about like people in positions with hundreds of thousands, millions of followers, very well off in very secure positions, and their ability for the fans to actually reach them, like, you know, that distance is so much further out, because these people aren't fucking streaming and tweeting and like people that you can't meet to these players in a fucking, you know, ranked game. You're not going to bump into your favorite player in ranked. In a traditional sport, you're not going to bump into this coach or like have any sort of interaction. These coaches aren't going to stream on Twitch for you and answer your questions and doing Q&A. The level of distance between them and you, it's like they might as well live on the moon.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas like the people that exist in our space in esports, not even just Overwatch League, but just in esports in general, they're so close to everybody. Like, if Pre decided to stream, which he did plenty of, you could just go into a stream and talk to him. You're never going to get that with a GM of a traditional sports team. Like, you can't even make that same comparison. It's like, if you want to use the defense, or like this is how it is in traditional sports, it's like, cool, then we should just be a traditional sport. Let's treat us like a traditional sports, pay us like a traditional sport, have the viewership of a traditional sport, and have the extreme distance between the communication of like people working in that sport versus the fans. But we don't have that.
Yeah. And I will say, like, we're not going to solve it here, right? What we can do is like appeal to the, educated, like erudite TCP viewer to maybe eventually, every once in a while, grab one hill and just, say, look, guys, here's a load of critical thinking. What do we actually know about the situation? Can we be this sure that these are the people that are making the problems? Or like are incompetent? Dude, this is another thing that it's really hard to communicate this to people without sounding like being bad at judging characters or competence yourself. But there are very few. I find, like, whenever I get someone into a room and I discuss their ideas, their outlook on Overwatch League, judge their ability to make decisions and whatnot, I'm seldom getting out of this meeting going like, okay, that dude is probably just incompetent. Most of the people now in this league in leadership positions are smart, dude. They absolutely are. Like, sometimes you get dealt a shit hand. Maybe you're sitting on long contracts, right? Maybe your owner wants something out of you, which could be anything from your lineup has to have X nationality ratio. Yeah. Your lineup can cost this. You have to see, like, we only have like 3 rooms available for 9 people. Like, whatever it is, you rarely get the full picture. You rarely get the full picture of the negotiations, how they went down, how reputational issues can work against you, how local issues can work against you. Like, for instance, let's say it's down to taxes, it's down to like the local culture of the city you're in. Does it have a Koreatown where people can feel comfortable in and whatnot? These, like, none of the franchises are created equal. The challenges are very unique in some circumstances, especially at the higher levels of general managers who have to adapt to the specific situation. There are no idiots left anymore. I agree that we had incompetent fools, and unfortunately, to this day we're suffering from what they did to this league, and they definitely contributed to the erosion of player rights. But for the most part, we filtered them out at this point, and we're in a position where if something looks like it's like moronic, we probably don't have the full picture. I think that's a pretty good heuristic to go about things. Like, if something looks like in sheer incompetence with very obvious solutions, you probably are missing something that is just not the case, that they somehow couldn't do. There was a contract in place. There was like something behind the scenes going on that they couldn't do it. If you work yourself from that, you're more likely to find out the true position of the special meta than the other way around. Never attribute to malice what owners could be doing behind the scenes.
Or at least, apply Occam's razor if you can. It's just like, maybe, despite most things not being super incompetent now, sometimes it's just some bullshit that happens that you have to play around. Could be some incompetency from elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's typically not due to malice. I mean, there's no situations here where people are just mustache twirling villains. That doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
In real life, this is not a good and bad, good versus evil kind of situation. So we can just kind of stop there and not have to like be on that level. I don't know. This whole situation transparency is a bit of a catch-22. Because like I've gone off on fans for just like wildly speculating. It was like, well, what else are we supposed to do? Like, we're not being given any information, so of course we're going to wildly speculate. But the issue is, if you do get given information, you still wildly speculate off whatever information you do get, and then you eventually use that information as ammunition to burn somebody at the stake, and somebody ends up losing their fucking job over it. So it's like, no, you don't get shit. You just don't get shit. There's so many things that people don't know about that happen behind the scenes, and it's better it stays that way because the public just can't be trusted with that kind of information. People aren't necessarily being lied to. They're just having a lot of information being omitted because the public wouldn't know how to handle that kind of situation. And I know people were like, yeah, but I could handle it. It's like, maybe you could, but the lowest common denominator among you can't, and they're the ones that ruin it. Sorry. So, no. No, I don't think I will, is a response when it comes to transparency. Let's talk about something that is public, though. Unless Joe wanted to finally touch up on that, because we spent a little bit of time on that.
I agree. I think that we're entering, not to get real meta, but I think we're entering an age of social media that I think people are waking up to the negative side effects of being a little too transparent. And I think that's like trickling into our domain that, maybe the cost of being super public isn't worth the reward that it could give you. And it sucks that it has to be that way, but
every one reasonable person is 100 idiots that just do the wrong thing with it.
Yeah. Yep. And I will say it now just like feels very obvious to me why the new battleground is social media managers, because if nobody talks and there's only one public facing actor,
and
they all social media manager.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that.
Then it's that dude, right?
He's the one that's talking. They're the one that's talking, so they get it. Like, yeah, it seems pretty readable, sadly.
To be fair, the public kind of like reacted pretty quickly in most of those instances and just went like, guys, that's not the guy who presses tweet that probably made the problem here.
Yes.
I would just like love if we could have that mechanism for all the other topics as well.
Well, people also said it's like, well, we don't know who to blame. It's just like, that's not the point. The point is you're always looking for somebody to blame. So the people that you want to blame are hiding behind the shadows because they know you want to blame them. That's why you don't know who to blame. You don't know who to blame by design because the people don't want you to know who to blame.
Yeah.
Because you're very blamey. You are very finger pointy. Everyone's extremely finger pointy.
Yeah.
People can't just be chill about situation. They got to point fingers. Let's move on actually now to the actual discussion of the moves itself. We want to go over the actual Justice results first and talk about Justice overall post trades.
I would love
or do we start with?
I am fucking down to talk about Justice because I am
right,
weirdly glowing.
Joe's been waiting to talk, so
Joe,
why don't you take the floor here? Talk about the fact that Justice have just gone 2-0 post 1-0 post blow up. They already did have. No, hang on. I'm capping. They had a loss to San Francisco, which is quite reasonable, being that they were 2-0 up and then San Francisco reverse swept them. I don't think that's crazy. I think you can't be upset about that, given that Shock looks like maybe the best team right now.
Yeah.
So putting Shock to the knife and forcing them to reverse sweep you is a pretty damn good achievement for a team like the Washington Justice. But then they come out post implosion and they just 3-0 Florida.
And to be fair, we're only in week 2 of the Summer Showdown. Granted, this is halfway through the qualifying matches, so it's, I think we are starting to see like the actual hierarchy of these teams. I think Florida is a team that kind of like sits in the wings a little bit. They're in that weird mess of a gray area. But that's kind of where you assume Justice was going to be, if not maybe even a little bit worse post, losing Vigilante, who somebody was, everybody was waiting for them to come into the league and actually perform really well. You lose Mag, who, again, I think we're going to have to rewrite the book on like how we really should view Mag, looking at what he's doing with Boston. And now you're seeing Assassin come in, who I think a lot of people just kind of like poo-poo on, and like maybe we'll return to that in the future. But as it stands right now with this meta, it still kind of works for them. And even then, the blueprint that maybe they laid in the pre-stage, if you want to call it that, maybe he's hinting at some of the scrimbucks that were coming out. about how good this team was doing, maybe there's some residual carryover because this team doesn't look bad. I like how proactive they are. I like how quickly Assassin is kind of melded in, and they're a cohesive unit. I can't say that for a lot of teams. It's weird how good Justice are right now. I'm gonna say it.
Can I add in that it's like people probably have like a weirdly negative view on Assassin because of the whole Sombra shenanigans from last year, and that kind of reputation is just carried over to this year. Even though he's not even playing Sombra, no one in their right mind is playing Sombra. Sorry, London. You know, the guy is playing Genji, and people are like, "Oh my god, I can't believe he's a good Genji." It's like, dude, that's his actual role and his actual hero. That's his actual hero. I'm sorry, he's not a Sombra main. You stop looking at him from the perspective of a Sombra main. He's actually normally like a Genji flex DPS projectile main. He's now finally getting to play his actual heroes. So,
I'm gonna up the ante there for a second. Shout out to Houston, but I'm gonna go a step farther, and I think if they had Kalios last year, whom if people remember, and hopefully my history. It was a really shitty joke. Don't think too hard on it.
Oh right, sorry, I misheard.
No, you're good.
Misunderstood.
I think maybe the zeitgeist of the public view, like the collective view of Assassin, is probably a whole lot different if Kalios is your starting tank. I really do think that kid has like a special. And I'm going to attribute this with very little evidence outside of maybe that couple weeks with New York that they seemed very much revitalized, and this kind of revitalization with I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say a revitalization, but I do think that he brings a lot of like calling structure. If I had to place a bet on it, I think he does bring some calling structure. I think this team is seeing kind of a breath of fresh air. Weirdly enough, again, for those who are shrewd, I'd go back and listen to AVRL's discussion about the Justice and all that stuff, and maybe what could have happened or what was going on. But I think this team's on the mend, weirdly enough.
Dropped some legitimate, never before publicly heard of juice last podcast. No one gave a fuck. Now you're going to get a bunch of people like, what was the juice? Wait, I wasn't here last week. What was the juice? Sorry, you're going to have to go back to the previous episode
and find out. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a pompous asshole, but I think if you put on your thinking caps, if you want to play Sherlock for a moment, I don't think it's too hard to find if you're like really looking. But now that that's resolved, and the medic still kind of fits them. Again, Decay's not a bad player, and I think we saw that still. Like he's weirdly good. He's super flexible. He can play all these different things. The fact that he was playing flex, he can come over to hitscan. He's still playing well. Assassin, you know, it's a saving grace for them that this meta still fits what they have, because Kalios I don't think is terrible. I think like coaching wise, they're again very cohesive. So I would attribute that to like a solid game plan at the very least. It's a miracle that it's going as well as it is. I'll say that, and I really think that.
However, finish, but I'm gonna pose a point to you.
No, I think that as it stands right now for the summer showdown, I think Justice are not going to be a write-off team. I really do believe that they're going to be a threat.
Now to really play devil's advocate, I have to pose something towards you. How much of this is due to the fact that it's against Florida? And people will use like, but you just beat Florida, you know, excuse.
True, of course.
You can either see it as an excuse or like a justification, but in either case, like how do you respond to that? Given like, okay, let's praise Washington, but let's also contextualize the win.
Maybe it's not without to directly like kind of handle that point. I think it's with reason, right? I think it's a rational take to go, okay, well, it was just Florida, but this again. I don't want to harp on match scores a little bit too much, but like it was pretty decisive. It was pretty clean. And like if you go through with a fine-tooth comb through like a considerable amount of Overwatch, I see very direct proactivity. A lot like this feels like game script to them. Like it's not methodical to like a Dallas level, whom I think is probably the NA leader at the moment. I attribute like high proactivity rates to like success and like skill and like mastery of what's going on. And I see that from Justice. Is it a little bit messier? 100% it is. But like, that's something that I can't say about Florida. That's something I can't say about most of these teams, there are a lot. There's very slow neutral states that I don't see from the Justice. They're like very willing. They're almost like Vancouver 2019-esque of just like run it down. We'll play for the mid fight and like we'll figure it out. But as long as we're like all pushing together, like, you know, the adage of like the 5 dumb fingers makes one strong fist, like it works. And like I think it's working for the Justice in a very miraculous way. I think it's beautiful. I think it's great. And yeah, I'm concerned for maybe some of their opponents.
Can I well, I think Yiska had a take coming in. I'm just going to very quickly contextualize and respond to and answer my own devil's advocate in terms of how I respond to that kind of criticism. And again, maybe it's slightly justified, but at the same time, here's a level of revisionism people are coming into this as well, because on one hand, people will say like, yeah, well, you know, Washington, they're only 9th. Of course they're worse than Florida. Florida's definitely a better team than Washington. And then those perhaps same people, I don't know if that is the same people, but for the sake of the straw man that I'm going to be putting up there, that I'm about to light up a fire, for my personal straw man, I'm going to say it is the same people. They are now coming back and saying, yeah, like, well, if they only beat Florida, Florida's not a very good team. Which one is it? Is Florida a good team that the Washington Justice is supposed to lose to? Or are they not a good team that the Washington Justice should be beating? Like, it can't be both, so fucking pick one. Because before this, people were saying that, like, well, Washington's clearly dog shit, so Florida's like a great middle tier team and Washington's low tier, right? That's the general fan view. And now people being revisionist and flipping the script, saying, no, Florida are the bad team and Justice the good team. It's like, that's not what you were saying fucking 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
You didn't say that 2 weeks ago, motherfucker. You've changed you've 180'd your view. Which one is it? And there's my straw man now on fire. Thank you.
Burning Man 2022.
Yeah. I feel like we you know, this is one of the beauties of the situation where I feel like I, for the longest time, have been on this hill that, like, the meta is a gamble and you just have to play your odds. There's an article I wrote in 2019 on the fucking topic. And
link in the description below.
Was it Don't Marry the Meta? Which one was it?
No, it's
because there are some evergreen ones.
It is called The Meta is a Gamble. Why don't you play the odds?
Okay.
And then basically maybe we co-created the thought at the same time, or Monty read my piece and like then said publicly like, yeah, maybe the Outlaws should be playing something else than meta, you know.
The goats discussion.
But yeah, that was like always my thing. Yeah. But it's also a slightly different tinge of this to understand. It's the meta, the strongest meta composition will determine the winner very often.
Oh, for
in
sure.
the Overwatch League,
of course.
Right? Like, once again, we're in probability distributions. Like, it's very possible that for the majority of metas, Gladiators are the best team in the league.
Probably.
They have the greatest flexibility.
Yeah.
But
and the greatest peaks on that flexibility as well. So
it is equally possible that this best team in most metas is just mid in this particular meta.
Sure.
Right?
And that looks like the case, to be honest.
I know people hate this because it feels like such a lack of agency that you can be one of the most well-prepared teams in the league, and then when push comes to shove, like, there are certain metas which you can't cover. Yeah. Also, like, I mean, okay, this is... I remember having a discussion with, like, you and Kenobi about this, about the Justice, about them hitting their meta.
Yeah.
I feel like that point, maybe not to the nth degree, but to a large degree has now been proven that they hit their meta now. Now they're actually, despite like eating shit for breakfast for the last 4 weeks, are a pretty good team.
100%. I think when you come into the stage and you go very close with the shock, and you know you suffer a hefty blow, losing some stars, some real firepower, some talent that you were kind of banking on. I don't know if I'd necessarily say that they were playing for the meta, you know, coming into week 2 of the Summer Showdown, or week 16 if you're looking at the season schedule as a whole. But they certainly have gambled and won, right? Like, this has worked out in their favor, I think, more than people understand. Again, referencing maybe some of the moves may have been actually beneficial for them. I'm gonna really lean into that because I've been very consistent that this team has needed to make moves in the past and hasn't, and now that they have, they actually might perform a little bit more consistently. And yeah, I agree that you probably should be gambling in very controlled and smart ways. It's just surprising to me, at least, that after getting, gut checked, Justice is still taking a team maybe of their tier or caliber and convincingly, sending them packing. That's impressive to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about where the players. Well, we said where the players have went.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how that's been going so far. Probably what is on everyone's lips right now that they want to hear is the LA Gladiators happy. Would we all agree that happy on Glads is probably an upgrade? First and foremost.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I would say so.
So given that, it hasn't really results-wise shifted the needle for Glads just yet. Now, given Happy has only just joined the team, so maybe, I don't know if there's teething issues there yet, or if there's any of that to go over. But Gladiators have had a pretty rough stage so far. Patapan can't play due to an injury. An's apparently no good on the Sojin, so much so that Shu has to play the Sojin. Now you finally got Happy that plays it all. But the players so far that have been offloaded from the Justice have not performed. Well, their teams have not performed well, whereas the Justice just got a win. It's kind of crazy. Eyes on Vigilante in Rain in future games. I think they actually did win their game versus Paris. I think it would have been funny if Rain also lost to Paris. You're like, see? See?
They were the problem all along.
Justice offloaded the dead weight. Now they're a good team because they finally got rid of the dead weight on the team. See, no, and I have like a 9,000 IQ theory as well. I got my tinfoil hat on for this one. The real strategy here, Supreme is actually a Bond villain, and what he's done is he's implanted sleeper cell agents on these other 3 NA teams to destroy them internally. And now, and this is if Atlanta did actually lose to Paris, Atlanta, Boston, and Gladiators are all shitty, and Washington Justice can just overtake them now because Supreme has activated his sleeper agents within these teams to sabotage them. It's very smart. He's actually a genius.
It wasn't necessarily the fact that the internal strife couldn't be solved by the MK Ultra project. It was so that they could release their agents to disrupt the entire league, and thus the Justice climb. I'm with you, AVRL. All right,
offload your internal strife to the other teams. Yeah.
Spread the corruption. I like it. I'm here for it. All right. I'm liking where this is going. Sorry, there's just a black van that pulled up. I gotta go. Sorry, there's like men in. It's really strange.
Goddamn.
Anyhow,
men with white, red, and blue shields coming to get you.
Yeah.
All right. So what is happening in the Gladiators? They're losing.
They're losing.
Yiska just put out a. We'll say tweet. I was going to say report. I will just say a tweet. You can say it's a report if you want. A tweet that says that there's still something like a 55% chance Glads make it despite being 0-4 down. That's pretty wild. It does require them to be...
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot that needs to go right.
Assuming that certain things happen for them.
Yeah.
55 sounds too high. That shouldn't be that high, surely.
Like,
or am I not understanding?
Okay, so the proposition is... So basically, like... RD ran the model first, saying, based on the results this week, what are the this stage? What are the chances that the Gladiators actually make it? And the first model was like 12%. And then I said, well, okay, that's interesting, but the Gladiators are sort of like lowballed there. So, what if the Gladiators actually win both of their matches, and they are assumed to lose against ATL? And I think there's also, with Speedily coming in, there's a good idea that this happens. But there is, if we assume that the Gladiators just do it by themselves, and I just put my Preds head on and said 3-0 Paris, 3-1 Atlanta. I think that's pretty conservative. What happens if that happens? And the numbers bear out that in 55% of the cases they qualify, In 44% of the places, they do so in 8th place. They even have a 10% chance to get 7th. So, and this is based on the elo created on maps this stage. Okay.
Gotcha.
There's of course a ton of like the funny way is how this stage works out is that there's a ton of I call them seesaw matches. I'm not sure if there's they're basically like
Swing matches.
If one team goes up, the other goes down, and they're in direct competition with the Gladiators. So,
right.
like if for instance, if Spitfire or Atlanta loses, it's not that bad for the Gladiators, right? Mm-hmm. Or like there are other teams. I think it's Titans maybe that's playing another team where it's like if either of those loses, that's fine for the Gladiators, right? Like one of those teams will be above them, one of those teams will be below them, and like they don't have to care that much. And that's how a lot of these matches have shaken out, and that's what created these the situation where yes, if Gladiators win their matches, half the time they make it in.
Wow. Takes all that to stop the Gladiators, huh? Even after going 0-4, they're still not. They just can't extinguish them. They're still in it.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna try to appeal to all the fatigued Andes out there, the people who are like, "Wah, team shouldn't win twice in a row. It's boring." I don't know if I want to see the Glads at Summer Showdown. I'm not like
I would like to
with how they're performing.
I wouldn't mind seeing them there. And look, at the end of the day, if they are good enough to make, it would be the most crazy organizational comeback.
Yes.
If they beat the last two teams that they need, somehow make it in via mathematics, and then somehow just make the run as the 8th seed.
Yes.
Oh boy, like I don't.
Does that not feel like an ATL run? If that
just
screams like
just forget
ATL
about
energy.
the playoffs and just give them the trophy now. Like, like you literally are just the best team if you can do that.
Some
I don't know.
ironclad mentals.
I was going to mention that. Like this, that aside, let's talk about the 4 games that have happened.
Yeah.
Am I wild that my copium says that the losses weren't that bad? Okay, the Houston one might have been a bit bad, but Dallas is one of the
tough to.
Dallas is one of the best teams in this meta currently.
Not mad at
Shock
that.
are one of the best teams in this meta
Not
currently.
mad at that either.
Toronto's on a huge upswing. You could argue
They're playing good.
Loss,
yeah.
but Toronto's on a huge upswing. I don't think it's wild to think that losing to Toronto's that bad.
Yeah.
Houston is a little bit bad. I think that if you play that game again today, Glad's actually beat Houston. Yeah. But obviously Houston has some issues that they're dealing with. So that's the only outlier. The only loss that I feel like was an outlier is the Glad's Houston game. Aside from that,
it is still game 5. To be fair,
I still think Glad's maybe should have won 3 instead of 0-4.
Yeah,
they're still struggling, but they're losing to teams that are just like legitimately so damn strong in this meta. To which I think I already know what the response is. The response is, well, aren't Glads meant to be good in this meta? Didn't people say Funny After Skewed was going to be the best and all that kind of jazz? And while I think that's true, and they are really good at their roles, can I also put out the statement, the take, and the opinion that I don't think supports are that impactful in this meta? I know that's going to trigger some people. Like, what do you mean? Break and Lucio do things. It's like in comparison to previous metas. In comparison to previous metas, where you've had double flex support, which does a lot. The more flex supports you have on your team, the high impact the supports are. This isn't even just coming from me, by the way. Leave in an interview said this as well, that he feels like supports are very weak right now in terms of, not weak in terms of the hero balance, they're obviously fucking strong. They're weak in terms of their individual impact on swinging fights and doing all that. And before people get upset, like, yeah, but Rally and Soundberry are good. It's like, yes, I'm not saying they're not, but I'm saying like in comparison to other metas, supports are less impactful in this meta compared to other metas. And because of that, having a Funny Asher and Skewed, Funny Asher and Skewed, like that's not the difference maker currently.
Yeah.
Right?
I think the difference maker, and I know this sounds incredibly general, but when you look at this meta and you look at other metas that kind of mimic the way that this plays, not going to say the G word, I think it's about cohesion. The G word goats, like all these death ball archetypical metas. I think the idea is that you don't necessarily need all stars. I think this meta, amongst a lot of them, probably lends itself to allowing as many all-stars to have them as much individual impact as you can, but like the difference that makes for you is so much lower in these metas in comparison to something like, you know, an attribute. Like if we're gonna roll D&D stats, like I want cohesion, I want teamwork, I want like good comms. I don't need like a cracked brig. I don't need crazy Reddit Lucio man, right? Like those aren't the players that are necessarily going to move the needle. What moves the needle is like making sure we have good resource usage, making sure we're like alt tracking, making sure we're just like moving together, which is like really basic shit that like still is not necessarily happening. So it's, yes, you probably want like a good Genji. Yes. But I mean, credit to London, but that's magical to me. You probably want a good hit scan. You want like somebody like Hisu, but you know, I'm struggling with him too. Like there are roles that you want impact players for, but like they're smaller in deathball metas in my opinion. So it's yeah, maybe supports aren't necessarily the keys for this metagame. And I think like coming into this, it was as good of a read as anybody was going to have. Is like, okay, we see what's being played, who has the pieces to play it, not necessarily the pieces to understand it. That's something you're going to know week one. And like, boy, howdy, did we figure it out week one when the Glads go 0-2. It's like, oh shit, they don't know what's going on. They have the keys to the castle, but they don't know what to do with a castle, right? They don't know how to drive the car. They don't know. They're baking in a carpentry competition. They don't know what the fuck's happening. So it's I think we're starting to catch up to the idea that there was a big experience reset when it comes to junker goats. I said it.
I mean, is it experience reset or is it just, you know, different match selection?
Help me understand what that means.
Okay, so yeah, I keep doing that. I have this thing where I read like a word like match selection in like, you know, another more abstract context, and then I just like see it in my world and just like to slap the label on it. But it's a useful term that I guess like
Teacher Yiska, explain.
I'm just sitting here sometimes going like, I'm literally watching people play video games. I gotta derive more meaning from this.
yes.
Like I have 4,000 weeks in life. I have about half of those left. Like, is esports the thing that I spend my finite time on? Yes, because I learned about match selection. And you will learn match selection from Uncle Yiska too. So the basic idea is like, yes, you can become much better at things and like improve, but that's only one way to improve your outlook on things, right? A much better way is to match select, meaning, like for instance, switch between jobs and see what you like and what you have a talent for, right? And start at a higher baseline and therefore also have a higher cap as to where you could go. Now, match selection in terms of the meta situation is like, maybe you just play what you're good at, and maybe you're good enough to just make that meta. Dallas does this all the time, dude. Yes. Like because they have to.
Yep.
I feel like you know the flexibility of Gladiators is kind of put in the bin as well in a meta like this, and we're gonna get maybe a little bit more into detail. We're not gonna get into the real trunk of the jokes discussion yet because we're still talking about teams. So in relation to the Gladiators, part of their biggest strength is applying the sort of depth of their roster to the meta, which in the previous meta, Midseason Madness, meant that you had map-specific strategies where Arns could come in on the Widowmaker, play as best heroes, and people can do their things, and, you know, even times when Space actually had game time to play Sigma on the Circuit Royale map. Like, that's all gone now. So when Glads are a team that get forced into a homogenous meta, it in some ways kind of like hurts them as well, given that, you know, they don't get to really play to one of the biggest team strengths, which is to be able to widely play counter picks. Because here's the other thing that people don't understand is that they have wild ability, and this was true last year as well, to enable counter pick compositions to put their opponents into difficult positions in terms of choosing compositions to play, because they have the roster depth and the flexibility of those members to play literally any meta, any sort of composition all up, including double main support. They're probably one of the only teams that are actually prepared to play both double main support and double flex support, right? Which is a wild thing to have. And they don't even need four support players to do that. They can do that on 3, which is so insane. And all sorts of projectile hit scans, different tanks, like even, you having space as a backup option for particular off-tank metas is a ridiculous thing to have. Yep. But all of that's kind of gone for Gladiators, and they're just kind of forced into this one composition where, like, if a player isn't working out, maybe Reiner, I think statistically, you are starting to see that he's not quite keeping up with some of the big boys out there. And we can talk about his rookie of the year prospects and all that. Maybe not in this particular discussion, but it's like, you don't get to do too much with that. And people say, well, why don't you just play Space? I think it's like, I don't know. Maybe they can. Maybe Space will come out this week. I don't even know that it's specifically Reiner's fault. It could be like it's probably a combination of things. It's a combination of things plus, like, losing 0-4 means your stats do get shit on a little bit.
Yeah.
My biggest argument for Glad's copium is that I don't think it's that bad, and I don't think the teams they lost to is that ridiculous. I think we're just in a different expectation, in a different framework of expectation, where, like, because they've won 2 tournaments back to back now.
You kind of assume that they would
you're and because everyone's put them number 1 in power rankings for good reason.
Yeah.
Everyone's expectation is like, well, if they're not thrashing everybody and just beating everybody as the best team in the world, then what is Gladiators? So, people probably expect them to beat Dallas and Shock and Toronto and probably especially Houston. But here we are. I don't know. I think it's like, it's not like they got 0-3'd by somebody. It's not like they're being 3-0 speed ran like Washington did to Florida, right? That didn't happen.
A lot of game 5s, a lot of close maps. Like, they're competitive. I think there is just like a roughness to them that I think is new for this season, and I think it's just shifting expectations. I agree with you. I don't think it's like, doomsday for them for the entire season. I think they can easily bounce back.
You should see the Glads fans right now, because they're acting like the season's over. They're acting they're acting like they're about to not make playoffs or something like that.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think they're already locked, no? Like, I think mathematically they're locked. Maybe Eric can correct me in our chat, but I'm pretty sure they are.
I am not 100% on that, but maybe they are mathematically locked. Yeah, they have 17 points. It's pretty hard to drop down below that. Yeah, regular season record's not great, but winning 2 tournaments, it does give you a fuck ton of points.
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on to Boston. Let's speed through a little bit of this as well. Boston Mag. 2 conversations to go here. One is that Boston Mag upgrade, good for the team. And the other part of the conversation is, my God, they're doing my dude Punk dirty again. Boston, keep doing Punk dirty. What is going on?
I'm going to go out on that latter point, and I'm going to say that this may be a little weird, but I hope a team like the Houston Outlaws makes a play for Punk in the offseason, because he is proven time after time after time after, let me check my time.
Check your watch.
This kid is a starter. He should be starting in this league. He is a talent and should be playing. I'm not mad at Boston, because, again, like, I kind of always assumed that this was probably a card that they were going to play, that if there was ever a world where they could just play a fully Korean roster, they would. And again,
it's the Laurie effect.
It really does.
Laurie's dream to field the full Korean roster in the Boston uprising.
And I can't blame them. I don't blame them, but, like, the collateral damage of, like, not seeing somebody like Punk, who started the stage looking quite good, not start for another Overwatch League franchise, I think we're missing out. And I think somebody, like, needs to get that kid and, like, use the talent that he, like, rightfully, like, pay this man to play. Like,
it also screws Crimzo out of the roster. It's because it's like,
true, yeah.
Well, there's no point just having one white dude there. Let's make it full Korean.
Yeah.
And Laurie's like, finally, my dream team.
No English speakers on this
them.
Team.
Love it.
It sucks that, like, that was probably always, like, bound to happen. But I don't blame the coaching staff of the franchise to do it. But yeah,
let's answer the mag question first, because I know we want to bite into the Punk, but I'm afraid we're going to skip over the mag stuff if we don't get into it. The most baity question would be, is mag an upgrade over Punk? And I think that's just too hard to answer.
Yeah,
because it's like,
right now.
Because I think Punk adds something of value to the team that's not just 100% his own mechanics as a player.
Yeah.
But let's be clear that I think most people would agree that Mag is pretty decent in this meta. That he should
for
be
sure.
a good enough player individually.
Mm-hmm.
Who did Boston play
Boston
and lose
played
to again?
Shock. Got 3-0.
They beat Atlanta, which was good, but then they got 0-3 to London, 0-3 by Shock, and then 1-3 by Dallas. So unfortunately, they are also a team that has to play two of the best teams in this meta back-to-back, in Shock and Dallas. Now, I don't think that's the craziest thing in the world. I think the Boston loss to London is a little bit more wild. And correct me if I'm wrong, but did Punk not play that game versus London?
I am gonna check.
He must have, because Mag was in the game versus Shock the day before. So Mag wasn't on Boston yet.
Yeah, I don't think he was even on there. Yeah, had to
so
have been
Punk was still there versus the London game. So that's the game that I think is more concerning, rather than the Shock Dallas games, where I'm like, you're literally playing against your choice between number 1 and number 2 currently in this meta.
I think in that same way, I think there are some expectations to be set and matched with London. I still think it's crazy that they're performing as well as they are. If you subscribe to the idea that like Genji is a very important piece to this puzzle, and Backbone like still is finding a way to get it done, and this team is facilitating him in some magical way to get this kid on like maybe a top 5 arguable like team. Credit to you again, like that's some magic work that Chris and Co are doing.
If I'm saying that the double main supports don't have like insane value and insane impact on this meta compared to other metas, I am also by extension saying that Genji does have an extreme amount of value and impact in this meta. To the point where I personally think, I know some people and some players and coaches may probably say that the Jungle Queen is like the biggest factor. My read is that I personally believe Genji is the biggest factor.
Yeah,
which is why I was low on London, which is why
rightfully so.
Kind of performing is a little bit interesting to me, but sticking more to the Boston side of the conversation, because we still got to talk about Punk in that whole nutshell. They both work. I'm just so surprised they went 0-3 London, because even if London win, which is not out of the question, surely not a 3-0.
No, and it was pretty handed. I think for Boston, it's I'm reaching in the memory banks for this game, because I believe this was like not a great performance from, I believe it was Victoria, who was on the Sojourn. I don't think he had a great day at the office. I'm still waiting to see where and how Seeker is being used. I kind of assumed that that's what the play was, but after Mag coming in, that's probably not going to happen.
They're not using Seeker because he's not Korean.
Exactly.
Why would they use Seeker? Laurie only wants to field Korean players. Why would they ever use Seeker?
The idea was like coming into week 1, I kind of assumed Seeker was coming in. This is before the Mag signing. But yeah, it definitely can't happen now. Agreed on that front. So it is a little strange. I think that Mag does give them a boost. I just don't know if we're going to see it in time, because you go into week 17 or week 3 of the Summer Showdown. They have to play Toronto, whom I think AVRL has rightly pointed out that they're on a surge. They probably are top 5 in NA. And then they play Vancouver, which could be winnable to round out the stage. Like, I don't even know that.
Vancouver's not even a gimme. So it's like that could be a hard game to win. Hard game to play.
Tough. I think that this team is going to benefit from like having a single language, having somebody who I still think has like star potential in Mag. I just don't know that we're going to see it within this stage, which kind of sucks. I think this is a team like that I would be willing to put some money on, that has like a good play and run and probably ends up making playoffs because of it. We will see.
All right, bring up the tweet. Time to dig into the tweet.
Zipbunk.
2 of them.
Zipbunk. Where is Ashton? Why am I being bunked?
I
am benched again.
Punk has survived Boston benching him for Dragon Eddy, Muffin, Brucein, Gable, She Marvel, It's All Mag. Who are they going to pick up next to take a shot at the king?
It is wild.
It is crazy how many players Punk has survived against. And before people say like, what do you mean Dragon Eddy? This list from Unter includes people from Uprising Academy as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, they keep trying to bench Punk, but he keeps on being the better player on the team. I don't know if he's going to get a chance to show that again, given that he doesn't have the angle to prove it through something, especially on a new hero like Jungle Queen.
Mhm.
He doesn't get to prove that in like ranked or anything like that. And he has to convince his team to run him in scrims to compare him to Mag.
Yep.
Which maybe he can successfully do. It's hard to say. And then there's some extra spice here from Colorhex, an ex-teammate of Punk from the Boston Uprising, who says, watching people talk about Punk and knowing it's barely the tip of the iceberg for what that kid has had to deal with on that team. Obviously can't speak for this year, but the shit that happened last year was fucking disturbing. When will he get the respect he deserves? Of course, Yiska, I'm waiting for the article, the tell-all article about what the situation is. No, I have no idea what this is about, but
Yeah, me neither.
it does seem like Punk doesn't get a fair shake.
Yeah.
Sadly, and I wonder if it comes down to like the mantra of like, yeah, well, the better player is just gonna play, and maybe the better player is who makes the team better. And I don't think that's necessarily his fault that he just doesn't speak Korean. But that shouldn't like discount his skill. I think we saw that in week 1. He was like actually like a solid Junker Queen. I think the amount of time that he's persisted, I think speaks to his caliber of skill. And yeah, I genuinely do think there are like teams that should be rebuilding Western in the offseason, already Western teams that could be making plays for him in the offseason. Like, this is a starting piece for Overwatch 2, one that you can probably build a franchise around, and be okay with that. Like, this is a good player that like needs to be starting in the Overwatch League. I wholeheartedly believe that at this point. We've seen it on Sigma. We've seen it a little bit of Junker Queen. We've seen it on Diva. Like, this kid just persists. And in a game like Overwatch, to persist is to be like bulletproof, in my opinion. That's difficult to do. How many careers? Has anybody heard from Gableshe in a while? Just gonna throw that out there. What's up with him? How many players have just come up, looked okay? It feels like it, right? Like, how many players have ended up just returning to the ocean, and you still have somebody like Punk. You still have like all of these evergreen players that says something about who they are, that says something about their worth. That I don't know exactly among these attributes that I'm prescribing what that could be, but I think there's an essence of truth within all of them, that like, this is somebody special that needs to be playing. Please, somebody help him.
If not on Boston, then somewhere else.
Yes, yes.
I don't know if Yiska has anything further to add to that, but we're going to move to Atlanta
Yeah.
in a hot second.
I think, you know, if Kulush wasn't this good, I think Punk is absolutely like a type of caliber player that Shock could be looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh. Pauses.
I'm not mad at that at all.
Eyes emoji.
I still think that Houston. I think Houston.
No, I'm not implying anything like in that terms, because Kulush is a very good player this season, right?
Mm-hmm,
like you probably like
weirdly good.
It is at best a side grade to get Punk, right? But yeah, like that's still the type of caliber that you have there, right? Like, so I don't know, like. Do you guys have any trade targets in mind there? Like,
I think Seoul Dynasty. they seem to be wanting to make some moves. We'll get to that. We're still getting to that.
True.
I don't know, because I feel like, you know, there's probably Western teams that would like someone like that, but ones that would probably make that kind of move are like, I don't know, maybe a Paris, but they obviously wouldn't be able to pay him a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe Florida would go for him if they could dodge the buyout. I don't know. Houston's probably a good shout, given that they actually have. Do they? Like, they do, and they don't have roster like space currently. Reign if Hawk wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like, it's teams that have people in those positions already. Sadly.
Yeah.
I'm looking at like a team like that like needs a facelift. I'm looking at maybe like a New York.
I can tell you actually. Here's the real answer. You just said it. New York when they finally go Western.
Yeah. I think it's inevitable. I think it's like smart. I think it's a good business. Like, you could probably get players on the cheap. Depending on like what Punk's buyout is. Granted, like I think it's the one thing you probably say about Boston is they're probably going to make you pay, and rightfully so. But yeah, I think they're. I don't know. I don't really care who it is at this point. The kid needs to be playing. I think for the product's sake, he's too good to be sitting on the bench.
Mm-hmm. Replace Daisy on Chengdu Hunters. Do that.
Fuck it. At this point, go for it.
Okay. Speaking of replacements, Atlanta Reign are about to get another replacement. Let's talk about Vigilante first, and we talk about the Speedily situation as well. Let's talk about the fact that Atlanta has been a bit of a rough start in this patch. They did beat Paris, but it's probably expected that they do beat Paris. This was also, by the way, one of Kai's biggest games on Sojin ever.
Mm-hmm.
Guy came in with a bit of a... He came in for blood. He was out for vengeance.
Yep.
Bit of a tangentially, bit of a rough start for Paris. I think they always knew that was going to be a bit of a rough start. I don't think, and Nero was even very respectful in the interview by saying, they were probably just nervous. He expected more from Paris, and I think we all maybe expected a little bit more, but a bunch of contenders players coming in day one.
First game,
it's not going to be easy.
No.
And Atlanta, despite having a slow start, are a team that you can't underestimate or screw around.
No.
But yeah, they moved Ultraviolet out of the brig position. They moved Vigilante in, and they won.
They did. I think it's one of those games that's going to be tough to like really fine tooth because I do wonder how much they were tested in a 3-0 against contenders players who, again, that's their actual rookie debut. But from what we've seen from Atlanta from week 1, again, getting beaten by Boston, whom that's a little rough, and then Toronto, whom that's not a fair loss. Like that's a good team versus.
Just gonna say
ATL.
real quick, I predicted both of those losses.
You did. 100% accurate.
I also then predicted them beating Paris. So apparently, I know exactly how Atlanta's going to play.
You're living rent free.
So don't ask me how they're going to do versus London. I refuse to tell you.
That said, I think you bring up Nero, you bring up Speedily. I have to wonder because. And for context, I've been a pretty big Nero apologist in the past. I think the kid is quite talented. Yeah. I don't think he's been particularly
not the worst Emperor.
Good. No, I think he's been particularly poor. I don't think the cohesion is there right now. I'm almost like, to a degree, that's so suspicious that makes me wonder, is Nero just playing Speedily's role and they've been playing with him in the wings anyways? I genuinely have to wonder that because it is so like uncharacteristic for like some of these mistakes to be happening. It's weird that Atlanta is playing a archetype or a style that I think they should kind of be suited to almost. You have somebody like Kai, you have Hawk that's been playing, Deathball-esque metas for I think is almost his entire career. You have Brad who's like kind of coached this style before. I expected a lot from them, and I'm not seeing it. So I have to wonder if Speedily is not like is not scrimming, or like maybe he is scrimming, and Nero is just like playing as an interim player.
Does he wildly move the needle though? I don't know. I'm starting to believe that maybe he does because like I was of the opinion. Several months back when Speedily was announced, was like, dude, this guy's not going to be available for so long.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's really going to change that much for Atlanta because it's going to take so long to get to him. But now I'm like seeing Atlanta's current results and I'm thinking, shit, maybe.
I think even like day one, you hear Speedily's going to Atlanta, can't play until the summer or late or early fall. I think you have to. Even me as a Nero apologist says like, yeah, that's probably like an improvement. And like you're saying, because of like the skill level that they are at now, or the level that they're at now, this, I would assume, probably is going to like be the breath of fresh air. At the very least, at least they have like another threat to worry about, because it didn't feel like Nero was getting the same impact on Genji that like some of these top performers are. And I guess if you're going to look at London, maybe you don't need to have a top Genji, but that still is magical to me. So I think ATL is on the mend, but I think cautiously so. I think, they go into week 3 versus London and then Washington. Like, those are not easy games. So if Speedily can come out and actually like play to the expectations that I think a lot of people have set for him, we're in for some good games, because I don't think Washington is a sleeper team, and it seems like London's still playing strong. They're still chugging along somehow, magically. Credit to them, but it begs belief at this point. So it's still not an easy schedule. It's an easier schedule, but
before we move on to other teams, any thoughts on Atlanta? You're a bit of a Speedily guy.
A Speedily apologist.
The Speedsters.
I don't know if he's muted. He might be muted.
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
Contemplating.
I just see your head in your hands, and I
Yeah, true. Yeah, I'll bend my camera into shape for the next podcast. Pinky promise.
You're good. You're good. I'm only teasing.
Yeah. So, I talked to some other coaches.
Oh, he's talking. Boy, we talking
about Speedily, and they generally expect this kid to hit the ground running pretty early. Now, this is not, like, I have to explicitly say, this is not, born out of seeing Speedily in scrims. That also doesn't necessarily mean that he will be starting. I think that's also not a given. But generally speaking, like, this is a Genji meta, and this guy is known for 2 heroes, right?
Echo and Genji.
It's Echo and Genji. Yep. Now, Echo looked...
Oh, I was going to add the Doom in there as well, but... Okay,
true.
We'll stop it
that's
too.
fair.
We'll stop it
That's a good 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you don't play Doom here.
No.
Like,
wait, what?
Green Bar Lady
But
made
Atlanta
sure of
love
that.
Doom.
Green Bar Lady, the Schmoney meta.
Yeah. Shmoney? Yeah, a lot of...
Shmoney Comp, let's go.
A lot of Overwatch League teams have started calling the Drunker Queen comp Shmoney, because it turns the health bugs green.
Like Schmoney.
Fucking Zoomus, man.
What are you gonna do?
But yeah, like, long story short, I think that would be an interesting modifier. I think it also changes so much about this week. Like, Atlanta has not been great so far, but like, if this actually turns their luck around, this really fucks with the outcome, and like, going forward into Summer Showdown, like, this kid might single-handedly decide who sits on a plane to Toronto in 2 weeks' time. Like, I'm excited, because I think this is also another thing that, like, I've been thinking about. Like, the star building out of contenders, if you don't have like an AVRL like hype man, it could be better. Let's say this, right? And Speedily absolutely is one of those talents that should be hyped, right?
Yep.
And unfortunately, I haven't seen a subreddit post so far, for instance, or anyone going wild on Twitter about that. So I think this is a huge...
I think when the signing happened, I can probably assume 2 people had made some stirring, but it's tough to continue like the 36 days until Speedily turns 18 and
right, but like,
on all your favorite
really
players.
The week, right? Like,
I know. It's tough.
He turns 18 on the day he plays London, I think. That's the first match, I believe.
And he'll play, right? Like, he's going to be there.
I would probably.
I mean,
I
okay, that I don't know. I would assume so, just based on the meta. I think like if it was a May meta, I think that's where I go Nero.
Sure, maybe Nero.
But like I mean, you never go in Nero for Echo over Speedily.
Nope.
I think that's also not anything that says anything about Nero. Like, Speedily might genuinely be the best Echo in the game.
Yes, I think we've anecdotally had people from like contenders in collegiate, like, third hand tell us that players have like compared him to Alpha E and said maybe he's even better, and like that says something.
Speedily to Alpha E.
Yes, which is crazy.
Right, now that I'm gonna have to see to believe.
Sure, that's agreed.
I'll stay open-minded about it. We'll say that.
The thing is, like, this is the type of rookie that we should be talking about. Like, once again, like Mr. and Mrs. Speedily Senior, like you fucked up. You
had your baby too late.
It's too late. This young man is never going to get a Rookie of the Year. It's
and that's. I feel like we need to have like a meta discussion about that because there's so many players that falls like crime
to
to
save Speedily's ability to get Rookie of the Year over Hijinks next year. You need to not debut him right now and allow him to only come in next year to allow him to compete.
Well, I think that even in that case, as long as you signed, the Overwatch League unfortunately recognizes you no longer a rookie next year.
Yeah, sadly.
That's
really because I think Shy was signed early, but he didn't.
Yeah, as long as you're not playing. That's a good question. I actually don't know.
I actually have no idea.
Yeah.
That's oh my god, I have the perfect metaphor, but like it's very perverted.
Shocking. Right, that does not surprise me about you, but
keep that one into the DMs.
Okay,
I know,
right.
I know Germans do like to do that kind of stuff. So
right, like I'll write it out. The viewers will be able to enjoy Joe's face, going like, "Why are you like this?" Like he usually does, and
you'll write it out, and I'll decide if it's
suitable for
our broadcast.
Or is it TVMA? Will this be on HBO in the 90s?
Too much expectation now. Now I'm expecting it to be too good.
I'm
afraid it won't live up to. It's probably not going to live up to the expectations of what I have in my mind.
He's a closet zoomer. He like hates what he's become. Yeah, it's not that funny, guys.
I'm gonna say that one is not gonna come onto the broadcast. We're not gonna put that one on the broadcast. That one stays in the DMs. That one stays in the drafts. Yiska. That one does not. You do not hit submit on that one for the public.
Like, what can I do against puritanical Americans or those impacted
for the
by
audience
the
that are listening? You didn't miss out on much.
You didn't miss much. Yeah.
Don't be too upset. You didn't. You really did not miss out.
No, I think I've fucked up on the language as well. I think there's something there. I just don't have the brain power.
Yeah. If you wrote this in German for me, it'd be better. It'd be funnier. Okay, let's talk about. Are we ready to move on to Houston yet?
Let's get to Houston.
The Houston use. That's Houston juice. My goodness.
My Houston's loose.
All right, so when's Pelican leaving? Apparently Halo was right all along. So when's Pelican leaving, huh?
Why would he be leaving?
Because Houston are trying to get rid of Pelican, Iris, and Piggy. I'm just gonna start calling him Iris again. Fuck it.
Good old Iris. This was a weird one, and I've had to like reflect this off of Yiska for a second. So I'm before the show rather, and I'm glad that I'm not crazy. But I looked at this trade and I was very like perplexed, and not like in a bad way, but I was like, huh, like what I'm trying to read.
Say what the trade was.
So it was Iris for creative. It was a flex support on a team without an abundance of resources. For a team with an abundance of resources that has multiple flex supports, Iris, who I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong in saying this, kind of was raised within the NA contender system, played with some mixed rosters, has been successful with mixed rosters, and is going to a fully Korean team. Obviously not crazy, but like it's interesting. And then a mixed roster is getting a player who has never played in that kind of environment. It's hard to kind of tell what this means, in between the lines, kind of reading the intentions of both teams. It's very bizarre. But when, like Yiska kind of alluded to at the start of the show, when you see somebody like Prophet playing Brig and you see like some of these roster decisions, it starts to make a little bit more sense that maybe not everything was, peachy keen in each of the camps. So maybe the trade was just like a mutual, like let's just shuffle it up. Let's see what the market says. And
I mean, this one needed to happen. Like my point was also more so like, because how the trade line works, like they had to do the trade fully knowing that for the next play dates, especially Seoul, because they don't have another flex support, someone else would have to pick up the slack while Iris goes back to Korea, and presumably there's some travel time there, right? And ideally, you would have had that trade done way before, but because like the trade deadline actually facilitated the immediacy to that, it came down a little bit closer, right? So they couldn't have him over presumably yet.
Sure.
What I will say is, okay, and here, like, tell me if I'm far off. To me, creative mostly an Ana one trick. And that's not to say that creative can't play other heroes. It's more like it's very clearly much better on Ana.
Let's be a bit careful, because last year we all called Iris the BAP one trick.
Yeah,
Right.
and-
Well, that would be my second
That was
point.
true at the time.
yes.
Yeah, that would be my second point. I feel like Iris has shown that he's a more complete player. It's not just a BAP one trick. I think like if you knew how this player plays, you look at Lastro playing Brig, you already should be suspecting that something is up there, because like Iris should have played that Brig role if he was available at the time. So yeah, I mean, definitely an upgrade from me for the Dynasty. And for Houston, it's kind of interesting because I mean, let's also be honest. Like, inserting 2 European players on ping in that situation at this point in time is a real strange one. That once again,
So 1 European, right?
I'm. Wait,
Dosh and
Leb and
Leb,
Dosh, right?
Yeah.
Lip is in America, isn't he? I thought only Doge was European.
Oh, you might be right. That actually sounds like it checks out.
Yeah, I would have to.
Either case. Either
right.
case.
Either way.
But yeah, the point being, like, there are circumstances probably behind the scenes where this made more sense than it does to us from the outside.
Yeah.
And I mean, creative is still like we all realized, like, during some parts of the season, creative was actually pretty sweet, and also last season, I would say, right?
Quite good.
So, I mean, what I feel like Iris is probably a better player. I feel like if you have another flex support already, then someone and also someone that doesn't necessarily like has, the Ana as their strength. I think that pickup also makes sense. So there's some outside explanation to this move. It's still a little bit of a weird one for sure.
Agreed.
It's got to be more behind the scenes. I can't imagine. I imagine this was the only successful offload from the whole like Houston exploring options for Pelican, Piggy, Eris, and then Sol's like, oh, perked up the ears, like, we could be interested in a flex support trade.
Yeah. I guess this is one piece of information I can offer up, and once again, like, this is something. If I knew it for sure, it would be a report, not me saying it on Crouch, just verbally bullshitting. But like, from what I know, Iris had always pretty high and competitive salaries, so I'm not sure what's up with creative. And if they even like traded for money as well, or like if everyone signed a new contract or what it is. But like, one possible aspect in all player for player trades is also just like bankroll management. It's also very possible that sometimes this comes to play. Like, I know, like, sometimes I say this things like this, knowing that I'm pointing towards the truth. This is not this case. This is just like me explaining, like, this is a possible avenue, which could absolutely not be anything true about it,
Yeah, you can't ignore the fact that this could just be a money thing, but
Also,
I mean, Pelican's probably their most expensive player as well. It's just like, that's the one guy that they couldn't. But then again, if they were really trying to offload members, they wouldn't have. Because then there was also reporting that, like, Pelican was obviously going for a lot, to no one's surprise.
Yeah.
And no one wants to pay that, right? I don't know. It's
yeah.
Pelican can't be traded now because he's played past the deadline, so he's officially unable to be traded.
Yeah. Let me throw this additional piece of information in there, which I could confirm. Vigilante was also up for discussion for Seoul. So
boom,
Okay.
juice. You got the juice, and it probably won't even make compound, but you got the juice. You know what? If next episode when we reference this juice, and you're like, "What was the juice?" Too late. You need to go
It's
back
already
one
out there.
right now. If you're hearing this right now, congratulations. You're here for the juice.
You're a real one. Let's go, real ones.
Pat
Rise
yourself on the
up.
back. All right, go on. So,
like,
so
okay,
Vigilante possible to Soul at one point. Yep.
right. Who would you have taken, Errol? Not your have infinite money glitch. You don't have to consider anything else. Just
I don't
like,
know what.
who would you like?
Like I do have infinite money,
Yes.
or I don't. I do.
Yeah, either create Iris or Vigilante. You can't say Jonak or something.
Part of me wants to gamble on a rookie. Just like I know there's just some insane, and he's not even just some rookie either. He's like, you know, at least in contenders, he was on par with Finn.
Yeah.
So like you're getting a pretty fucking good dude. Sure, Eris has got the veterancy there, and he's a bit more of a known quantity. So if you want a safe bet, you probably go for Eris. But if you want a player you can develop who is a little bit more untapped, I think Vigilante's maybe a better shot. I'm a bit of a risk taker. It
Okay.
also depends on your season as well. Like I think both would probably end up being a bit of an upgrade over creative ultimately.
Mhm.
So you can't really go wrong here. I don't know. I'm probably more of a risk taker. I go Vigilante.
Right. Yeah, I don't hate it. It's also, I'm not sure if you want to jump there, but like that move where they actually ended up going, it's a bit of a weird one, right? No?
To Atlanta?
What do you mean to Atlanta?
Yeah. Like it felt like for a long time, or not long time, but at least last season, like, yeah, they have Venom, but it always felt like Sephi was slowly but surely building like his ideal Western roster. And now he has a relapse to like as the market opportunity presents itself, where he just like decides, okay, yeah, I mean this is a thing, right? And
It's funny because both Laurie and Brad are trying to build their ideal race-based rosters, and but Laurie's like, "Oh shit, more Koreans available. Let's go, baby."
Yeah, and it's a weird one. Like, by the way, if I'm not sure if I ever said it on Crouch, but unfortunately, like the saga here has a little bit taken a little bit of a timeout because Depay left the Gladiators. But there's a baller movie, just like between Brad and Depay, essentially always trying to fulfill the same objective, which is win the Overwatch League the best way they can. And how do they do that? Probably by like getting the best Western players. And those guys both had always like really solid budgets and were negotiating against each other's, signing like the crown jewels away from each other, having like mental breakdowns over that. And like the movie there is fire as hell. Like if you just look at the positions, like dude, I would pay solid money for the minute after, like, I don't know, Depay finds out, Brad finds out that Kevster is signed to a long contract, or the minute after, Depay finds out Kai is locked in, or UV and OG is locked in. Dude, that is big Hollywood shit. Like,
both coaches there trying to relive the dream of the 2019 World Cup with USA won.
Yep.
Wait, did USA win in 2019 or 2020? I can't remember.
Was it? Yeah, I don't know. What is time during COVID? Whatever. We get it. We remember. I think it was 2019. It was 19, right? I'm not sure.
No, baby. It's the plague years. Who knows?
I don't know. I can't remember. I'll figure it out.
Somebody
You
in the
guys
comments
continue.
will tell us.
Yeah.
No, I'll just tell you in like 3 seconds. Where were we on? Were we still talking about Houston?
But okay, and here, like Brad comes in and signs a Korean player again, and that's a weird one, right? I think Vigilante will probably have pretty solid retrade value. I will also say
It was 2019. I was right. Anyway,
like Vigilante probably is only a guy that you play in double flex support metas. I think UV has proven to be good enough to do the entire thing. I'm not sure, like maybe you need to build up leverage to solve an internal thing or whatever it is, but like this is a really interesting pickup that I wouldn't have seen coming.
I didn't think they needed a second flex support unless they truly believe we were heading into a double flex support meta again, or they lost a bit of confidence in UV, or I don't know. Like,
yeah,
is there
It's
a
very out there.
world where like maybe he was already kind of competitive for UV's position and like it was a good value pickup? Like the price was right. They had the money.
This is really embarrassing, but I totally forgot there wasn't a World Cup in 2020 because of COVID.
Yeah.
right.
I mean,
That makes perfect
Makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's right, because COVID happened in 2020 to the people like me who have brain damage and can't remember things.
Well,
So
long
of
COVID.
course there's thank you, COVID. COVID gave me brain damage. Yes. Anyway, sorry for that tangent.
right.
Yeah, I think Atlanta, like I don't feel like this doesn't set off my alarm bells, weirdly enough. I think maybe Vigilante just had like a good going price coming out of Justice, and like Brad.
I don't think
Mhm.
yeah, Brad probably did fine here. I don't think Arnold got anything. I don't think Arnold has to feel too bad about missing out on Vigilante. I feel like getting Aerosair is pretty decent.
Yeah.
For sure. 100%.
Depends on the
So
deal,
again,
right?
it comes down to the conversation of like, so what does this look like for Houston? What was their impetus for going for this? Does it literally just go back to the original Halo report of Houston wanting to offload these three players, and now 2 out of 3 of them are gone?
Certainly could be. I think to like combine the two, like with what Yiska said about maybe like budget management, things like that. Maybe the deal,
It could
cut into some of that budget. I don't know, right? Like it's.
I mean, it could be a lot of things, right? I think that's also like it's smart to like basically like if you feel like there's something extraordinary going on, you just report that they are trying to offload them and then let the history fill in, and if you get any more really solid evidence, like I mean, let's spell it out what it could be, and I'm once again only theorizing, but why would you need to offload those players? Well, for one, you might also be looking at your budget and might be realizing similar things as the Washington Justice ownership are realizing. The second thing is like you might be struggling with internal issues where you need to break up certain players in order to have an atmosphere going. There might be trade targets that you want to go for and free up budget. You're not necessarily losing budget, but you need to free it up in order to make a play wherever that goes, right? So, and I'm sure there are other situations where you consider the same thing. Maybe you're just sourcing the market and you actually found things that you think like solves gameplay issues that you're anticipating needing for the playoffs and whatnot. And you're just really genuinely maximizing your win percentages. Actually, this is the one that I believe the most. But yeah, I think like it's really hard to look behind the scenes. And I will also say, this is nothing out of the ordinary, whatever happens. Like this, like all of the things that I just mentioned happen in the league everywhere, all the time. It's completely normal, and even in winning teams, right? So.
Oh yeah, of course. 100%.
I feel like this, it's a very weird like situation. I think I'm very interested to see that. The Lep and Doge pickups aren't seen as the weird one outs more because they feel pretty weird. Like,
do they? I feel like that's exactly like what you like. To your point of like playing for like optimal situations in playoffs. I feel like adding like cheap depth is probably your best bet. No,
cheap depth from Europe that you're not going to import in on ping when you know how shit playing main tank on ping is?
I mean, yeah, that checks out. It is a little questionable, but I think it gives you options. God forbid, like that actually is, proven to be successful. I don't know.
Like, okay, I mean, you probably didn't know, but if you're sitting there, I think by that time that was actually already done. So I want, like, this is a fun hypothetical. What if is, let's say, Boston buys Mag, is open to trading Punk, which I'm not sure they would be, because technically speaking, they don't cover the same.
But
now, like, does Houston entertain Punk, you know? More so in that situation when something like that is available. Also, of course, the asking price is something that you would have to figure out. But, like, there are a lot of different scenarios here. And technically speaking, I think there's also still an issue of, like, covering the main tanks with which Doge does. And then you just have Dante for all the flex, like, playable flex tanks. Like, it's not like we're playing Diva in 2022, really.
Yeah.
So it makes some sense. At the same time, like, yeah, I wonder, like, maybe that it is just a 5-head, 6th dimension solution for very limited budget that actually solves all their problems, which is, once again, like, I don't find, like, I genuinely don't find that unbelievable.
Can we step into the Twilight Zone for a second? Because you mentioned a hypothetical, and it kind of slapped me in the face, talking about Boston and Houston here. I want to present this to both of you, and I want to kind of get your takes on this, because this feels like heretical, but I want to give a little bit of context. I do believe that, like, there is going to be some, like, budget trimming across esports as a whole, but especially within the Overwatch League, especially looking at Houston. I think that, the budget could be dwindling a little bit, and I think that maybe going into next year, maybe they're trying to, like, clean up the books a little bit. Is there a world where maybe you trade one of your star DPS players for Punk? Maybe a Pelican for Punk. I know that seems crazy.
Nah.
You don't think so?
Dude, that's way too much money. Like, they gotta give you a good chunk. And even then, that's probably, like, dude, like, it's almost impossible to replace Pelican.
I agree, but I don't. This is like a contenders question. I wonder if, like, there is, like, a upcoming talent that you could scout and try to make a play for that's maybe not even necessarily comparable, but could do the job, and then you actually have, like, a tank player that's, like, good. Not to say that Doge is bad, but again, like, European on ping, you have to give him a visa. That costs money. Punk's already here, right? And we've seen what he can do, and we've seen how much he can persist. I think, like, Punk has some value that, like, maybe he becomes a trade target for. Maybe there's, like, a weird world where, like, creative goes to Boston. I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to make trades up that, like, are fun to think about, because it feels weird to, like, trade Pelican, but, like, Houston need a tank.
You know what's
Simple
also
as.
Fun to think about? Joe, do you know what an option is? Like, in stocks?
Let's explain it for the class.
So, okay, an option is basically, like, you buy the option to buy a stock later on. Okay?
Yeah.
It's a little bit different and a little bit deeper, but this is as far as my metaphor sophistication goes, so you will have to do with it. Do you think there's a world where getting Piggy for any team in the Overwatch League is an option of buying Pelican? And if that is the case, is Pelican even that desirable of a trade target anymore? Do you understand what I mean?
Say that again?
Piggy is a free agent, right?
Correct.
Piggy is best friends with Pelican.
Yeah.
What if by signing Piggy, you're getting, like, first mover status on Pelican,
Okay.
or only trade
I think
destination.
really that tied to that, but this is another profit
I
gesture
don't.
situation.
I don't
like,
know how tight they are. That's my hypothetical here, but like, I think like they are pretty good friends, and I would say
Sure.
honestly,
Yeah.
like unless Piggy shapes up a lot, I think you have to value that against Pelican. If you really, and I'm not saying that that's the case, but if Pelican really is only wanting to play with a team that allows him to bring Piggy, I think that has to be valued against a player, unless Piggy literally also becomes one of the best tanks in the world, which
Yeah, and that's just not the case.
isn't looking great at this point. Yeah.
Oh, and it's sad to say. I think he has like some potential there, but like, I don't see it. There's a Sigma. I think you can confidently say that, but like everything else feels like very surfaceable. And
I think
we saw that this season, right? Like he doesn't have playing time. Dante's playing.
All of this, like all of what happened with Houston was totally fine for me and was not a red flag for Piggy until he didn't play Junker Queen.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I knew you could no longer justify his existence on the roster. Because if your tank player cannot pick up the new tank and your DPS player is playing it instead, despite you probably now being like everyone starts from zero, you can put your tank player on this, and theoretically they should be starting from the zero. If that cannot be accomplished, or you're not willing to do this, I mean, it doesn't necessarily only have to be down to Piggy, right? It could also be just a coaching decision. Then yes, something broke down along the way that is irreparable at this point, and you probably have to.
And
part ways.
even with the fact that we've established now via Harsha that Piggy did choose to leave,
Yeah,
it doesn't seem amicable. It doesn't seem like they're happy about that situation about him leaving. It doesn't seem like Piggy's extremely pleased. Definitely doesn't look like Pelican's happy. Pelican's definitely not pleased about that situation. God, yeah, I don't know. Like,
yeah, no.
we are moving towards the Houston roster that they are intending to go towards. They've still got Pelican on there. He's going to have to finish the season. He literally can't be traded anymore. Can't go anywhere else. They'll just have to make it work. But I think it seems like the general feeling is that Pelican probably isn't sticking around for next season, pending what his contract status is like. And it seems like maybe Houston want to offload him in the offseason anyway. So wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being the case.
It is kind of sad because, like, it felt like if they could have stick to the course, this team, as it looked and as it performed, was probably going to have the best regular season performance of any Houston squad ever, right? Like, last season was already pretty decent. They are now equal with last season, I think, in match score. They could have succeeded past that, but now they have the loss against NYXL, which they, could have likely avoided. They lost against London. Like, unfortunately, this puts them. Yeah, it puts a damper on the season that could have been very successful for them standards.
All right. Well, that's Houston.
Houstonable.
Very Houstonable.
Let's talk about the final trade, and then we'll move on. This one hopefully won't take too long. Kaan signed.
Ooh, big one.
Out of the whole Paris thing.
Yeah.
And then to make budget allocation for that signing, Spilo was let go, and he dropped a very comprehensive foot longer about it. Seems like Spilo was the assistant coach of London.
Yeah.
And TLDR, you can go to his Twitter if you want to find out the detailed response. But the TLDR is he wasn't able to be in person with the team at all this year. Part of that was perhaps budgetary, but part of that is definitely because he wanted to stay with his wife in the house that he owns and work remotely. And and there was a cost involved as well. He actually publicly released his salary. I think it was 45K, and for that he wouldn't be able to afford a place
Yeah, of course not.
with the team.
Yeah.
That being said, though, if he was in California, he would have to be paid a lot more than 42. He'd have to be paid 62, I think. 45, right? He'd have to be paid 62 to be working minimum in California. So he couldn't afford to move, and he didn't really want to move, and he was about to finally get sent to work with the team in person for 2 weeks. Then that all got cancelled because they picked up Kaan. And so he questions like, well, where did we get the budget to pick up Kaan if you can't fly me? And then it's like, well, yeah, unfortunately I had to drop you. And seems like, you know, he was very professional about it. He didn't seem to, you know, kick up a fuss too much. The only thing he kicked up a fuss about was the fact that they didn't give him a proper announcement, a farewell on Twitter, which was rectified. Has a lot of respect to Christopher Nuki and Commander X. And, you know, doesn't seem like there's bad blood there, so respect. But yeah, we lose Spilo, we gain Kaan on the team.
To me, if I had to read between the lines, and not to be an apologist, but I feel like this is like one of those moves that you have to be quick on, and like that comes at a cost. And it sounds like, and I am speculating, it sounds like, you know, they had to move quickly to meet, you know, a deadline of sorts. Maybe they were competing with another team. Again, I am speculating. I do not know that, but just from like how quickly all this. I mean, shit.
That'd be funny, wouldn't it? If they were competing against Atlanta.
I don't know that that's too far off base. That kind of makes a little bit of sense to me, at least. But yeah, I think like an incredible talent. I think without a buyout on his contract, or without a contract to buy out, he is a talent that is worth every penny that you can throw at him. Not to say that their support lineup has been like suspect, or you know, Landon, I believe is their flex. They're so kind of.
Yep. Landon's the only flex support.
It's Landon and Admiral. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think this is a great addition. Might actually genuinely be a starter. I think Nuki had tweeted that she had worked with Kaan in the past during, I think one of the World Cup appearances. So
German
it's
buff?
yeah, there's some synergy there. Maybe the trifecta. I think this is a good synergy. This is a good depth add. All things considered. So it sucks that you have to like cut somebody immediately to kind of race the market, but at the end of the day, you know, you're looking at your performance, you're looking at trying to ride the wave maybe a little bit longer for London.
Being an assistant coach is rough because you're never really the integral person on the team that has to be kept on.
Yeah.
And your budget allocation for your salary is almost always ends up being the most flexible. I mean, you're lucky to even have a team of assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Given,
honestly,
you know, most rosters will probably just have the one guy as a head coach and maybe luckily one extra person as an assistant coach. It's a lot of hours and a lot of work. Very hard to make it as a coach, and you kind of usually end up being the first target to be dropped as well, which is pretty wild. Yeah. So,
I mean, looking at it like with Kaan's addition, it's like I don't know where maybe you make future moves. I think there's one obvious one with Backbone. I think he's been a great role player, but for the future of Overwatch 2, is he the person that I'm going to like rest my laurels on as like the impact flex DPS that is going to like hard carry some games if we need him to? Maybe if there's a May meta, maybe if I can allocate enough budget to pay somebody.
It comes down to what you can afford.
May.
Like, who can you afford? You're not getting Kevster, so
obviously not, definitely not. But it's like, is there a world where maybe Backbone gets dropped in the off season? What I'm kind of talking about is like with the roster that they have now with Kaan's addition, it's like this team is shaking out to genuinely be like competitive moving forward. So I don't even know, like, I think there is an attack vector for improvement, and it's probably Backbone's replacement. But like outside of that, I think Hottie's been great. I think Coco like has some room to play in future metas as Overwatch 2 develops. I think they have the double flex support covered. Like, this team is shaking out to kind of be sustainable in the long term, and I think it speaks to the management. I think it's looking good.
I feel like they've also had some potential. I'm reading some tea leaves here. Potential issues with flexibility from Landon, given that he's mainly a BAP guy, and everything that's not BAP is definitely going to be a little bit, worse for Landon. So this is potentially their way of fixing that.
Could be, yeah.
Also, considering that you have to remember from the off-season moves, Landon wasn't their first choice. He's a replacement for Provide. So it's like they weren't planning on. Landon wasn't the first option for them to take. It was the one they was available at the time for them to, load onto the team. And I think thankfully, because Landon didn't want to play a lot of Rhine stuff, Landon's BAP fits that archetype very, very well. So there's that.
Yeah.
But yeah, does seem like a future moves thing. I agree.
I think like a team like London, if I have Christopher right, and I haven't talked to him about it, but let's say you believe that Kaan is like a 5% upgrade at this point over London. London strikes me as a team that would not do that. Like I think.
So you're saying there needed to be a bigger improvement, like
no,
percentage.
like what I'm saying is, like for Kaan to become a starter, it would have to be such an upgrade in order to take the risk of destroying the atmosphere that they've built up and like the internal structure, where unless you can really clearly communicate what each of these players is going to do and give them like, okay, if this hero is meta, you're playing first. If these heroes are meta, you're both playing at the same time. Like if you have a very clear outline that everyone is completely fine with, that's a different thing. But I think like if you just think Kaan is a straight upgrade on just like 2 of the picks, and you just want to slot him in over Landon, who has given you a lot this season and stepped into a tough position and has built up, like is part of the atmosphere that turned out to be one of the biggest strengths Spitfire has shown this year.
Yeah.
It's a hard one, hard gamble to take, just jeopardizing your culture. I think it's much more safe to integrate Kaan, have him get a feel for what the team is like. I think, and this might be, the reason why I think this might be the color, might be because of the color of my travel passport, is I believe like Kaan at playing at his best is like a top 5 candidate flex support. While I don't know that a top performing Landon is that. But once again, that's...
You're probably right. It's a hard thing to say, but yeah, I think that's probably not too far off base. Speaking of culture, by the way, and I'll bring this up because we do this. I want to wrap back on something. Because one of the questions out there is, does RSC play immediately on Seoul now? Given that, well, actually, the extended creative builds does creative C play as well. Given that Houston and Seoul have kind of locked up what they want to do in their supports for this meta.
Yeah.
I don't know about Houston, but I don't think Eris immediately sees play because, like you said, I think this is an established culture where you want Prophet on the squad. They probably won't ever bench Prophet or Proper. Neither of them will be benched on their respective teams, but Prophet's not going to get benched. And even if they wanted to integrate Eris, it's like, well, then Prophet moves back into Genji, Stalker moves back into Sojin. 2 players role swap back onto something they originally played, but it is still a role swap, and then you're introducing a brand new player where you don't know what the culture is going to be like.
Yeah.
But you're currently winning as Soul, so why would you do that? Like, what you're doing with Prophet Brig is currently working. To me, it feels like you might as well keep it going. It feels too dangerous to try and shake that up. It seems probably a little bit more reasonable to integrate Eris for Countdown Cup rather than this particular tournament. So no, I personally don't believe Eris is going to get integrated yet.
Yeah, fair.
And I don't... Is Kaan going to integrate it? I mean, he can just go from Texas to California, moving from Paris to London, but does he get integrated immediately or what? It's maybe that one's a bit harder to call.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
You
less
just-
likely just because of the replacement in that role.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Then again, I mean, every role is Prophet's role. Like, so maybe, I don't know, hard to say.
I was talking about Kaan, but yeah, I feel like Kaan probably won't play yet. I don't know.
I think to both points, it's probably tough to plug Kaan in. Probably a slower burn.
We are already on the topic of APAC, so we might as well get there now and review some of the stuff that happened there, including we touched up on Seoul, Profits on Brig, by the way,
Damn.
and shit's actually working. Prophet did actually play Brig back in Goats, but he played more Zarya. I feel like he definitely was more well known for his Zarya during the Goats meta rather than
Yeah.
the Brig.
I mean, he had to flex
And-
around Bird Ring, right? Like, that was,
Yeah,
by
I
the
don't
way,
think
like,
Bird Ring was.
I still, like, now I'm getting mad again for, like, the ridiculous underrating of Prophet's Season 2. Like, that dude had to flex around, like, guys that really clearly wanted to play an FPS, but, like, had to play a speed MOBA.
First person MOBA.
And, like, he did so admirably on both roles, right? And like, it's absolutely not fair to see Season 2 as like an off season for Prophet. If anything, that's more Season 3 during the Echo meta.
And funny enough, Season 3 was when they made finals.
Yes.
So even then, crazy. And they actually made more than one finals because they had May Melee as well.
Yeah.
So Seoul Dynasty currently fragging out. They're 6-0 in maps. 3-0 versus Hangzhou Spark. 3-0 versus Chengdu Hunters. Hangzhou Spark clearly struggling at the moment, but they also did just get wiped out by the two best teams. So it's like kind of hard to gauge Hangzhou Spark, who also don't have Alpha at the moment due to quarantine. Alpha should be available to play now for this weekend, but he was not available for week 1. From my perspective, having looked at these games, both Seoul and Shanghai having 6-0 starts, it's just insane. Like, both of these teams are so far ahead in the meta. They're so clean on this meta. They're great on all the heroes. They know exactly what they're doing. This is why I'm saying, like, Seoul probably don't want to integrate Eris right now because what they're doing is so good. Why would you change that?
There's no reason to. I think, again, a lot of these moves are going to have to be slow burns. You have people coming in, they have to travel, all this stuff that means that, you know, not only are they enabled to be there to play, they also can't practice to build up rapport, to understand what, you know, the hierarchy is and the team. All of these, like, soft things that I think people look over. It's not just a plug and play. Good player just, you know, play on ping and good player perform better. It just doesn't work that way. So to your point, I agree. Like, you're probably going to see more Profit break. You're probably going to continue. You know, a lot of these moves are probably going to be a little bit slower to integrate because of a lot of the logistics behind the trades and the movement and the whatnot. It's boring to say, but yeah, probably more of the same. And it doesn't sound like it's going that bad. So far, it looks like Seoul's actually performing quite well, right?
No, they've established themselves as top in the region again, which is to no one's surprise. I don't think their midseason madness will affect them too much here. It affects their reputation a little bit, but if you felt like Seoul was going to come into this stage weak, I don't know, man. Like, that just feels a little bit disingenuous to all the good work that Seoul's put in prior to the tournament. Stalker's Genji was phenomenal. Like, honestly, so good.
Believe it.
And some people are probably a little surprised by that, but it's like, you know, you should, if you knew him from Gen G, then you knew that his Genji was going to be great, you know?
And it's nuts to me because not to make this about me, but what caught my eye with Stalker initially was his Tracer. And then going back, it was like, oh, this kid is like way deeper than just like a Tracer player. Like, his Genji's quite phenomenal, quite good. And like, hearing you kind of talk about it as well, like, this kid's special. And the fact that, like, we haven't seen him, I think speaks to like the starting, you know, Profits and that duo and how good they are. But like, this was not, you know, this was not just like a rookie signing that they were going to keep on the bench to develop. This kid is a starter for most teams, and you're kind of seeing that kind of play out, it sounds like, which is really nice to see.
Also, just proving Profit's flexibility, to go back to what Yiska was saying, which is just really, you know, there was the commentary made on like, does this negatively impact Profit's MVP potential? And it's like, really, it should add to it.
It should add to it.
No, it
Yeah,
should,
that's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
The fact that like that's a sentiment that we have to fight off. Like a player that's maybe serviceable just on the surface level. The fact that you can say that about somebody that has been around the scene for upwards of 5 to 6 years, who's has won a championship, has won an Apex title, like is an MVP caliber talent almost every year he's played the game, and now he can play main support. He can play Brig. I'm sorry, that begs belief. That's unheard of. That's crazy. That's nutso talk.
Yeah. The thing is, unfortunately, from my consistency standpoint, this should hurt his ability to be a role staff for DPS.
Sure, I think that's fair. But
MVP doesn't change. MVP doesn't
Yes.
change, but I think Rollstar might slightly.
Yes.
Oh, who knows? Because I'm pretty sure the voting doesn't start until at least Countdown Cup, so there's still one more stage to play through before we really get into that.
We'll see. Like, usually we have it at like 75% of the season. If it would be after Countdown Cup, that would be a huge improvement. But, like, by the way, like, hey, Matt, if you send out those ballots and you think it's better to send them out earlier so more people come back to you, actually sending them very late is a great quality control of those that have a clue. Just do it after Countdown Cup. Thank you.
Or at least, like, the submissions should not be available to be sent in until after people see Countdown Cup.
Right.
Right. I don't know.
I'm gonna hijack
I feel like we didn't get to. At least I remember it was open prior to Countdown Cup opening last time, but I refused to send them in until after Countdown Cup.
I mean, smart.
Yeah.
Try to give the right people the votes. I think that's
Also, I'm
the
burning my
best
ballot
solution.
if Supreme is on it as Coach of the Year.
Oof. You won't.
I'm burning my ballot
that's
if he's
based.
not. He needs to be on there because again, his sleeper agent tactic is working wonders.
True.
I'm not. I didn't say how I would burn it and if it would serve as a thing to roll a thing up in. You know,
That's true.
which
He's
is the
using-
amount of substance I would need
Someone
in
that
order
I
to
would like to-
entertain it.
Someone that I would like to see on it is No Hill. So let's talk about the Valiant real quick as well.
Ooh,
They
okay.
are doing some stuff at the moment, putting Dia on the Junker Queen. So they're doing a bit of a Dante mirror type of move here,
Yeah.
putting a DPS player on the tank. And the more I see it, the more I'm like, this is what you need. This is probably like ideal because you're in a meta where tank flexibility is not required. You can literally one trick a single tank. It is the most DPS-like tank out of all tanks ever released. And DPS players can hit those mechanics probably a little bit more in some cases, not always, because people bring up how good Harmon is.
Right.
But there's plenty of arguments to be made that on specific teams where you don't have Harmon, which is 19 out of 20 teams, you may have a DPS player that can play those mechanics on the Junker Queen better than your tank players.
Mhm.
And to get to the situation where you're like, yeah, maybe Dia is that guy on our team. It's like, that's, to me, not out of the question. That's actually pretty out there. Like, I respect that from No Hill. They also play the Sash and Brig. I think that's just a response to them not having confidence on Molly's Brig. It is what it is. Sashin has been notably a very flexible player in the past. He's played DPS, he's played tank, now he's played support. Like, guys run through all three roles now professionally. I will say, like, sadly, you'd have to still put Valiant at the bottom of the power ranking despite looking good because they lost both their matches, 2-3s as well. Valiant have an uncanny ability to reach map 5s, but then fail to win them.
It's been all
This has
season,
happened
right?
So many times.
It's
So many
unreal.
times this season they've done that.
Do we have
It's
the
heartbreaking every
curse
time.
2-1s? No, not versus Philly.
No, that's
No.
some Houston like season 2 shit. Was it
Yep.
season 2, season 1?
Yep.
I forgot.
I think it was a carryover from both that like their map 5 win rate was like abysmal.
Let's
like
see.
they
1,
lost
2,
a ton of map 5.
3, 4, 5.
It's not great.
And the Valiant Philly map 5 was like down to the wire. Like it was,
Damn.
a single fight basically decided it.
Was it 5?
Granted,
Yes.
5. Okay, sweet.
the Valiant versus Guangzhou map 5 was super one-sided for Guangzhou.
Mm.
And man, were Valiant just like stubborn against trying to counter the Fire. It's like Fire is not even that great in the current patch.
Mhm.
And yet Valiant just refused to play Echo to just immediately counter it. And they allowed Guangzhou to run this Fire, which just beat them. And it's like, all right, guys,
Damn.
come on, please. That can't be it. This can't be the response.
Right.
I'm glad that, as much as it may not be ideal or optimal, I think the fact that we are seeing things like May, things like Farah, and to AVRL's point, maybe Echo in response to Farah, maybe the dichotomy between Ashe and Sojourn. I'm glad that there at least is some, and I'm coping here, I'm reaching here. There is some diversity. I appreciate that at the very least, that it's not completely rigid. And it is kind of interesting to
But it's like
have those-
diversity that doesn't even work. It's so easily counted, and it only works when the other team just like does nothing against it.
Yes.
Huh?
Yep.
Just ridiculous. Like, it should not be an issue. It's become an issue that was to me a non-issue.
Yep.
It should not have been an issue. It's just sad to see. Right. You also have Chengdu, which actually performed
Yeah.
admirably despite their 0-3 loss to Seoul, which was so bad. But then they had a 3-0 win versus Philly, who don't look particularly good right now. So Philly and Chengdu, I think, round out the middle tier next to Hangzhou. I still say that Guangzhou is at the bottom, but they at least beat the Valiant, so you can't put them number 7.
Right.
Seoul and Shanghai are clearly at the top. Hangzhou, Philly, Chengdu somewhere in the middle. Guangzhou, Valiant at the bottom is how the dichotomy of APAC works currently.
sense.
But Valiant have the capability to reach so much higher just because of what we saw out of them was so good. Like this could have easily been a 0-2 week for Philly.
Mm.
And then because of that, you'd have to put them number 7 if it was a 0-2 week. And people were so like defensive and tilted when I came out very early on coming into the stage and said like, yeah, I think Philly's not going to do well this meta. I think this is not the Phillies meta. This is I can see them losing. And people were like, no way, dude. Like Philly, they did the best out of all the APAC teams. No way, dude. It's like, guys, we're in a different meta, like different heroes. Yeah, but what about the Zeskenji? I'm like, yeah, but what about the rest of the team? One dude doesn't make your whole team as proven versus Chengdu. Like Zest can only do so much.
Well, MN3
Zest
should be
doesn't-
popping as well, right? Theoretically.
But
Like
he's
that DPS.
benched. He's benched behind
Yeah.
Carpe at the moment.
Yeah.
But that's the problem is like you can't even say like, oh, MN3 would do so much better. It's like he's really not. They played him and he still looks average as well.
Yeah, I don't know why
Like,
this boy is so
I-
inconsistent. Like this should be his meta, right? No?
Well, I don't think he's a really great Sojin. The problem is he's good on the traditional hit scans,
Yeah.
but he's just been okay on the Sojin.
Yeah.
And they trust Carpe Sojin more than MN3 Sojin, and part of me can't blame them for it because I like comparing the two. It's like neither of them are particularly great at it, but maybe Carpe is slightly better. And if you want to squeeze your percentage chance of winning, you probably do back Carpe a bit more than MN3.
Is there a world where perhaps you take the bite on the optimal train and you put MN3 on Ashe? Is that something that's tenable?
That is only good on certain maps, and even on the good Ashe maps like New Queen Street,
Mm.
but they put him in 3 in. He didn't play a single second of Ashe. Didn't play a lick of it. He only played Sojin, despite being on the Ashe map. And then you're at that point, you're like, well, why didn't they just keep Carpe in then? What was the point of the swap?
Yeah. That is a little confusing because I feel like you have a little bit of depth so that if you are, playing Ashe to be a little bit dynamic, to be a little creative, to maybe change up the tempo a little bit. And MN3 can be that guy for you, but if they're not doing it, then yeah, it does feel a little strange. That feels odd.
And then Hangzhou is just like a, we'll wait and see situation.
Yeah. Once
Wait and
Alpha
see
comes
how
in.
far Alpha U should change the needle quite a bit.
Yeah.
I feel like they also, here's the thing that people haven't talked about, is despite Irony being available to play, he hasn't scrimmed with his team because he's been in quarantine as well. For some reason, Alpha U's quarantine took longer, and Irony was available just to play with the team sooner. But he's not practicing this meta. Hangzhou Spark look underprepared in this meta because they had 2 players, 2 of their starting players, traveling, and one of them wasn't available for this match, for the opening weekend. Also, Hangzhou played the 2 best teams, so I think you have a very easy case of saying, like, okay, well, they lost to Seoul and Shanghai, didn't look pretty, but they could still very well be the 3rd best team in APAC for this meta after Seoul and Shanghai. Like, you probably put a tier break between Seoul, Shanghai, and Spark, but Spark might very well still be the 3rd best team, genuinely, because at least Spark didn't get embarrassed to Seoul the same way that Chengdu did. Chengdu were completely invisible versus Seoul. In fact, Seoul got a speed run. Seoul set a brand new league record in Dorado for fastest ever Dorado cap time versus Chengdu.
That's crazy.
That's a record that stood since 2018, by the way. And Seoul broke that record that stood in 2018 versus Chengdu. That bad.
Jeez.
Whereas at least Hangzhou looked semi-competitive.
Right.
So I think there's a fair case to say that Hangzhou is still probably the 3rd best team. They just haven't. Because they have more to show, whereas Chengdu, as good as they looked versus Philly, they don't have more to show. At this stage, you've seen everything they have to show.
Right. Yeah.
Hangzhou still have the extra scrim time required with Irony post-quarantine, plus Alpha E coming in. So there's more there that I'm banking that Hangzhou can really lean into. And that's going to be proven probably in the Chengdu versus Hangzhou match that is on the Friday, the opening match of APAC this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Can I open a small side topic? Like I'm just thinking about like why MN3 could be so inconsistent on Sojourn, and I remembered like one part of an interview I did with him, and basically like I think it's not just MN3 himself, but Philly in general, and I think they're right, is that they have identified that track aiming and snap aiming, so like, the Widow, the one-shot type of like flick aiming, are very different skill sets. Like, think of any other FPS franchise. Like,
that's like crazy.
With the exception of like Quake, almost every other game lets you get away with just doing one of the 2, right?
Yeah.
Like, not always. Like in CS, like you definitely, like, even your hardcore APA sometimes has to pick up a rifle and whatnot and learn spray control.
But even the rifling is like, spray control is not tracking aim.
Yeah. Yes. It's definitely different,
So-
yeah. But like in Overwatch, and especially Sojourn, like you can't get out of it. Like we used to have like very dedicated like track aimers and very, very dedicated. Like even like someone like Defran didn't have like, while he was probably the unrealist track aimer on Soldier, he wasn't like the best Widow in the world, right? Like it's a very different skill set. Now Sojourn wants both of those worlds from you.
Yeah,
it wants you to be very good at track aiming, arguably even a little bit of the projectile mindset there. And then it also wants you to be like a Widow hit scan god. And by the way, I'm still in the recording. My Discord just died, which is unfortunate. But since you guys can still hear me on the recording, I'll just keep going. But like this particular interaction between Sojourn's abilities is like almost a genius level requirement for players that just opened up the entire pool of responsibilities that are really like seldom the case in FPS, and I hope like we see more of this. But like this is exactly the type of thing that people then say when they say, okay, Overwatch is one of the hardest games to master. And it's true. It's just strictly speaking, it's absolutely true that you generally don't have to do this in other FPS, right? Like you can divide the skill sets, but when you have it on that, and then you also don't have the pre-aiming aim where people just come around the corner at the same head height or whatever, but they can jump, they have insane velocity and whatnot. Man, Overwatch is such a hard game to aim in. It's pretty sick. Like, so yeah, there's still a Discord issue persisting. Not really sure what to do about this here. And it only seems to be a German issue, because the funny thing for those, and this is a little bit how the cookie is made here, which is revealed, I can still see that Joe and Avril can talk to each other, and I can't see their cameras. As you can see, they're dancing. But I guess they could see me through YouTube and listen to me, right? Oh, wait, I could. Wait, this doesn't work. No, guys, my Discord is in perma spinny mode. That's the problem. It doesn't let me back into Discord. And I think I just checked mobile as well. And it doesn't even let me into Discord on mobile. So Discord seems completely down. Unlucky. Unlucky. We're trying to resolve this. Let's see. What? What other tool can you use in order to connect to people via voice? Is this where the good old Steam comes in? This is insane, by the way. I guess the other thing that we could do is unmute your OBS Ninja.
And that is episode 258.
Yeah, actually,
So,
Sounds so bad through OBS Ninja. It's crazy.
it really is.
so thanks for watching. Yiska's Discord died. And last thing was charge. We'll see what happens. New roster. Yay, go Jimmy.
Yiska, can you let us out of your basement, please?
No.
Can you even hear us?
Yes.
Yes, I can. You probably only hear me with a lot of delay.
A little bit. A little bit.
And I can hear myself. All right then.
What
Thanks
is-
for tuning in.
Technology.
Yes,
Does that help?
Yeah.
All right. Episode 258 of TCP brought to you by Discord. Thank you very much.
Peace.